Coming to you live from my apartment, it's Rob Has a Podcast. And now here's the guy who's still trying to make sense of what we have seen this season on Survivor. I am Rob Cesternino. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our post-finale recap episode here today. And boy, I am so thrilled. I really am so happy to have this woman here with us to talk about it all. This is so cool. And I think this is the first time we've ever done something like this where the winner of the previous season is here now after the season to talk about the new season. Here is the great winner of Survivor 42, Maryanne Oketch. Maryanne, how are you?
I'm doing good. Now I'm doing good. Apparently, I had a frog in my mouth. Oh my goodness, I'm doing great. Except for that. Wow, there goes my cool introduction. You hyped me up all for like a. I'll digress. Also, say it like it's Irish. Oketch.
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 Catch.
I'm not hearing what I'm saying differently than what you're saying.
With an E, you're saying with an ah. Oketch.
Oh,
Oketch.
Oketch.
There you go. Perfect. I digress. But I'm doing great. It's so great to just take off the crown and have someone to put it right next to. Yeah. And I'm so excited to just talk about what happened this episode because a lot happened that episode.
A lot happened. Well, I'm so thrilled that you're here. I love getting to talk with you. I hope you know this. I just think that you are so knowledgeable. I'm so impressed with you constantly because that you just know. I feel like you know everything about Survivor. You're like such a just in terms of like your recall is just amazing.
No.
I am in awe.
My recall, I will put my recall above the 50th percentile, but I am not. I'd be like struggling 75th. Like Omer's better than me at recall. I know a lot. I won't say that I won't know a lot, but I don't know everything.
Can I quiz you quickly? Okay, so famously in Survivor 42, when you got to the final 4 challenge, you said, Samotion. That's you knew the name of it, which I didn't even know it had a name before. Do you know the name of the challenge that was at the final 4, the challenge that Cassidy won?
No. I do not.
Nobody knows that one.
Yeah. I don't know that. I think it's like Samotion, I think is just a very easy one to remember the name because it has lore, right? So the challenges that have lore are easier to know what it is. Like Last Gasp, we all know what Last Gasp is. It's like Samotion, we all know what that one is. But because the way that Survivor does challenges, a lot of times you have multiple different things. Like you have your balance element, which can have 3 or 4 options. You have your puzzle element that can be a 3D puzzle, like a letter puzzle. You have maybe even a water element or a track element. They kind of can take any challenge and then mix and match it. So it could be like we want a physical element, a balance element, and this. So then after the names of the challenges can be hard to remember because it's a mix and match of this. But when you have singular challenges such as Samotion or such as Last Gasp that only have one element, it's much easier to remember it.
I just call this the one that Kim won. This is the Kim Spradlin challenge.
The Kim Spradlin challenge. That's fair.
Yeah, she won that back in Survivor One World. So, Maryanne, very excited to talk to you about everything. But it's been a busy day over here. I have already done exit interviews with the final 5.
Wonderful.
That those are processing right now. Scott St. Pierre is working on getting that podcast out for you. We're recording this podcast here on a Thursday afternoon as we are still trying to process what happened with the Survivor 43 finale. Now, Maryanne, I have to talk to you about something.
Yeah.
Okay. Because are you feeling a little bad that some people win this show and they give all their money to charity and others are not as charitable, let's just say?
Oh my goodness. I am not feeling bad. whatever you do with the million is your choice to do with the million. And like, unless like you have moral, it has moral implications of the negative, you really
Mm-hmm.
can't go wrong with how you do the money, right? It's like, I know a lot of people went and donated to charity. I know Adam Klein donated a portion to charity.
Yeah.
I'm working to make sure that I donate a portion also to like funds that I'm interested in, right? Gabler has the privilege of having that financial security where he can go and donate the money and still be fine. Right. If I went and donated all the money, yes, I could still be fine. But the opportunity of giving myself a leg up in life so I can go and
Mm-hmm.
have even more opportunities to donate, more opportunities to give, I think was hard to pass rather than that singular large scale donation. This, of course, is not me discrediting what Gabler does
Of
because
course
what
not.
he
Of course
did,
not. We're just having fun. Now,
yes.
Maryanne, are you still our reigning Canadian champion of Survivor?
Yes,
Because
but
there were no Canadian contenders to even attempt to take your title.
I know they got scared. They got
Yeah,
scared.
they got
So
scared.
Erica and I back to back, they couldn't do that. But I won't. I'm fine. I don't need to go with like the specifics of, oh, I'm currently the reigning champion of like the Canadian reigning champion. I just keep it right now. I'll just be like, I'm just the youngest winner by birth date. That's the one title which I'll hold on to until someone does take it away from me, which I don't think will happen. I think it'll happen in a bit. I think give it 4 or 5 years, but
Okay, wow. 4 or 5 years. That's a lot of confidence.
but okay, let me actually do my math because I think that the perfect age range to win Survivor, just statistically, is 25 to 35. So that means
Mhm.
actually I'm turning 25 in a couple of weeks. So that
Okay.
means that starting from season 45, 45 onwards, there's a chance that someone will go and win. But if you're looking at these past winners of the past new seasons, they're actually skewing a little bit on the older side of that 25 to 35. You're now looking at that 31, 32 range, right? Which is why I think maybe I believe that I will hold on to the title youngest winner of by birthday no later earlier than season 47 or 48. I don't think it's going to happen in the next 2 seasons. I could be wrong, but I
Mhm.
don't think I'm very let's give it 4 seasons. Four
Okay.
seasons. I
All
think I'll
right.
hold it on to four
Yeah, let's
seasons.
not get too in the weeds on this.
I
Okay.
know.
All right.
I know you'll have to pull me back, Rob. We can't be here for 10 hours.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, we have a lot to get through here today. Of course, we have a feedback show coming up on Friday. Brian Scally will be here if you want to send feedback questions in. robiswebsite.com/a voicemail. We'll also have some Twitter threads as well where you can send questions in. But Maryanne, let me just get your feedback about what happened. Gabler as the winner of the season. What's your reaction?
So this is my reaction. I came in being a Knight Rider. I was rooting for Owen. So then after, I really saw like at the finale, I'm like, he still has a chance. So we go to Final Tribal. I feel maybe it's Cassidy. Maybe if Owen does an amazing Final Tribal, it's going to be Owen. But then after, I'm watching through Tribal, I'm seeing Gabler's name come up. I'm like, okay, two Gablers. I guess it's still Cassidy. But then Gabler's name just continually kept on going up. And I just was flabbergasted. I was confused. I was like, what is happening? Like, this is wild. And I feel as if a lot of people felt that same
Yeah.
sentiment that I held.
Yeah. So I've been talking about this as a theory of the season was the perspective of the players,
Mm-hmm.
where this Gabler win was as shocking to them as it was to us.
Mm-hmm. That's a very interesting perspective because I know that the way that they're trying to tell the story of the season is like a murder mystery. This is a confirmed fact. So what the pieces are going to be is it's like who done it, who killed the person, who did this. But I do agree that it is a lot like the perspective of the players, where it's like, oh my goodness, like the players, it's Gabler who won, and when you balance that with the fact that it's a murder mystery and the fact that it's with the players' perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
I still think that there's actually a bit of unity. But the way that it's a unity, though, is in a retrospective view, right? So I feel as if we all said, oh my gosh, Gabler won. What the heck? Then within the next 2 and 3 minutes, we're like, oh, wait, he did always say he was under the radar, like hiding in plain sight. Oh, wait, this was a story that was being told consistently in the season. Oh, okay. I see looking back at the vote when Jesse got up Cody, Gabler did actually have his input about whispering. So you start to see those pieces falling back, right? But you're not, but in the moment, we didn't have, I think the shock factor for all of us made us not be able to see the work that Gabler was doing.
Hmm. Yeah. I would love to just get your sense on the final tribal council. You had such a
Mhm.
masterful final tribal council. Just it was earlier this year to us. When did you film Survivor 42?
I filmed May to June 2021.
Okay, so it was like a full year from
Yes.
your season finishing to when it ultimately aired. But it
Yes.
was only a couple months ago for us.
Mhm.
And so you had such a great final tribal council. I would love to get just your thoughts on the final tribal council and how everybody did.
Yes. So for that, I believe Final Tribal Council is still a part of the game. If you win just based on only Final Tribal Council, that's still a part of the game.
Hmm.
So I think that the biggest part and importance of Final Tribal is being authentic, being genuine about your game moves, and being self aware. You need to be self aware. You need to be able to own up everything that you've done, which goes together. And you also need to be able to articulate what you've done. What Gabler was able to do during Final Tribal is he was able to go and articulate what he did in the game, talking about being the Alec Gabler, going up and being under, talking about like how he was able to actually have an alliance with what was it, the Ride or Dies, which was just a bigger part of the season than it seemed at that moment. And he really explained what he was doing in that moment. And he really also owned up to the mistakes that he had in the game. He mentioned how in this first tribal he made a big mess about it and was willing to show that he was working on moving and improving his game. That's something that I think Owen also did. Owen was very genuine in the way that he was going to talk about his game, but the thing that Owen might have lacked that Gabler did have is a lot of times it seemed like there was no and after, like, oh, I was an underdog, things didn't go my way, but where was the but in that wasn't really shown in the final tribal that we saw. For third of all, for Cassidy, I would say that she had a final tribal where a lot of times it seemed like the way that she was answering questions, the jury wasn't looking for those answers, where she would feel like a good example is when they were talking about fire making, which we will get back to. But like she responded about how she felt that she didn't want to go talk, like she didn't want to do make fire. But then other jury members were like, oh, I don't like that answer. Oh, I don't like this. Or another big part of the point was when she was when it was raised about the move to get Riot out, how it was raised that it wasn't actually her move. She didn't really have a good counter argument to that. Like it was just like, okay, well, you're right, which is looks very bad in the jury's eyes.
Hmm. Yeah. I feel like that when there's a point where, the jury pushes back and like, yeah, actually that didn't happen that way. It just seems
Mm-hmm.
like that is. And I feel like that Mike had a moment that was like that in your final tribal council. Like it just feels like that is, it's like, oh, all right, I guess. Uh,
Yeah.
it just seems like it's so crushing for the person who's in
Mm-hmm.
the final three.
Exactly. And especially where it's like, how do you balance admitting that your narrative is incorrect from the final tribal, but also trying to not diminish the point that you're trying to make? That's
Hmm.
also an issue that's made back and forth. One with Cassidy, where I think the question was, what was the move that you made? She put up the Ryan vote. They said, no, that's not the move. So it's like, how do you respond for that? Do you fight being like, no, this was actually my move, or talking about the behind, or do you then bring up another point to be like, okay, maybe what this wasn't my move, but I had this alternative thing that we can go and discuss. So that's always that something that goes back and forth where it's like, do you divert or do you stand your ground and recognize as well too, like that your point is actually the correct point?
I wanted to ask you about the final tribal council and the jury's reaction. And we saw Gabler last night that he was really getting a very warm reaction from the jury. Lots of laughing from what Gabler is saying. And I saw some people saying, my friend Dr. Mike was saying, like, oh, Gabler got the jury to laugh. That's why he won the game. But my question for you is the laughter from the jury, is that ultimately something that wins the jury, or is that a symptom that the jury is already in your corner?
I will state that that's a symptom. I think that when the jury's laughing with you or when the jury is giving you something more than just like a stone face, that means that they're most likely on your side. This is something that we saw with Gabler.
Hmm.
This is something that we saw with Tony at Winners at War. And then this is something that also I saw in my final tribal at
Hmm.
the tail end when I was saying answers. I was seeing people's reactions, people's emotions. So that's kind of signs being like, okay, they're on my side. But I don't think that it's a symptom. I don't think that making them laugh is what gets you there. And that's from my anecdotal evidence, where it's like in the beginning when I had to fight for my case, I wasn't seeing a lot of that. But when they were willing to go and they're like, okay, I feel more comfortable, that's when the emotion started to show.
I agree 100%. I think that, they're laughing because that they are with you. And I think that that's like an interesting thing to be able to sort of like detect. Now, I don't know what you can do if they're not laughing at you and they're laughing with somebody else. Like, I don't know necessarily how you can sort of change the tide in the final tribal council. Can you?
It's hard. It's so, so hard. Like, I remember when at first in the first half of Final Tribal when a lot of the questions were being asked with Mike. And at that moment, you've worked so hard to get to Final Tribal and you see it's not going your way. It's so hard to just you need to be able to focus still on your tribal experience and try to shift the votes, but it's also so disheartening because you're not only thinking about, okay, this is how I answer the questions. These are the votes I need to swing. You're also thinking about where did I go wrong? What move should I have made? What about this? So you need to balance the feeling of panic with the feeling of, well, this is Final Tribal. This is still a part of the game to make yourself be able to go and sway the jury. But honestly, it really depends on the timing as well, too. Because if it's closer to the end of Final Tribal and people are laughing, like it's very hard to feel defeatist because like it to feel any hope because there's much little time to go and sway people's votes. But if it's more in the beginning and middle of Final Tribal, you still have a chance if you're able to go and still hold your ground.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. There are no opening or closing statements at the final tribal council in the modern game, correct?
No, there's no opening or closings, but
That's wild to me.
yeah, I prepped an opening and closing. Didn't need to use it though, so had to
I'm
chop it
sure
up
you
and
got it
add
in there.
things.
Yeah.
Yes, you have to add it and chop things. So I think the way that Final Tribal now works in the new era is that you usually have someone who opens the Final Tribal with this is the tone of the Final Tribal. So that was Jesse this season, Omer the last season, Evan the last one before. Then after you'll go and talk about your I think it's first social game, then your physical game, then your strategic game in that order. So there is some sort of linearity with Final Tribal that you can kind of understand which section you are at.
hmm And then how do you really prep like the things that you want to get out there when you are not really controlling the direction of the conversation?
Um, you need to find your entrance and slip it in. And if there is not an entrance and you feel that Final Tribal is wrapping up, you just need to interject your
hmm
way. Like for me, like, one of the big things, especially, was me pulling out the idol at the last minute. I
Yeah.
wanted it to be dramatic. One thing that Lindsay said was that they were feelings that Final Tribal was wrapping up. I still hadn't said anything, but then we had more time. Of course, if Final Tribal was wrapping up and Jeff was like, okay, it's time to vote, I'd be like, wait, one last thing. Because you are still able to speak and have that conversation, even though it's led by the jury. But you need to try to figure out exactly what your talking points, what angle of the strategy it lies on. So, for example, let's say you want to say, I've won 3 immunity wins. I'm a very physical beast, and you want to bring that up. Well, you know they're probably going to be talking about the physical aspect. So you then are like, okay, at physical, make sure that whenever there's a good opportunity to be like, oh, what about challenges? Yes, speaking about challenges, and you don't even need to, and it doesn't even need to be as clear of a concise. You can ramble your way to make an insert. Like, for example, me talking about my idol. It wasn't someone being like, what's a secret you kept in the game? But the question was, what's the big move you made? And I just basically said, from final six to final four, this was my plan. And then after I inserted it in that answer, so I still had that wow factor.
hmm
So it's really just trying to figure out, okay, how can I segue into this? What is the opening? So Final Tribal, your mind is always thinking. So you better eat that food to get some cognitive bearing.
So these players got to see the first half of your season, but they didn't get to see
Yes.
your final tribal council. Do you feel like that in any way that this final tribal council was more influenced by season 41 final tribal council as opposed to, had they seen your final tribal council?
I would say that yes, especially since people were referencing like the previous season. Like Owen said, "Oh, I was just being like, don't be as sad as Xander, don't be as sad as Xander." And also people saw what the like how Erica went to see her wit, like how Erica won that situation and saw how the jury was acting and what the questions that the jury had to see what they valued in that game. So I think that the seasons that you do watch do affect the way that you go into Final Tribal, which makes me very interested, especially for the next season, which I know way ahead. But I know that they watched the full season of 40. I'm on 42. Oh my gosh. So I'm very interested to see
You're
how
old
that will
school.
play out. I know, right? Put me up with Rob.
Yeah. Let me bring in a question from one of our listeners. Bobby Hall says, I'd love to hear Maryanne's thoughts on Final Tribal Council. Having given such an impressive performance herself, what does Maryanne have to say about identifying each finalist's win condition? We heard the jury mention that they have check boxes that they want each player to say. What can future players try to do at the Final Tribal to have their game stand out above the rest?
Um, I think the best way to go and speak to this is I think the most efficient way of looking at Final Tribal is to looking at the votes you need to swing. Like,
Hmm.
for example, you need 5 votes to win. That's a simple majority. Like, for a simple majority, you need 5 votes to win, which means it doesn't matter which 5 members of the jury you're pitching. All you need to realize is what votes you think you have on lock and what votes do you need to swing for. So, for example, let's say you're entering into Final Tribal and you know you have 3 votes locked. That means you need to just choose you. All your answers should not be going and catering to these 3. Of course, you're not going to ostracize them. You just want to answer genuinely. You want to go and cater your answers to the 2 people whose votes you do not have swing. You're only talking to 2 people. And this is how it works. So you need to just get yourself to 5 as easy and simple as possible. So that means, let's say, for example, you need, let's say, 3 votes. So you're like, these are my 3 possible targets of who I think will lean and swing towards me. So then after you're like, what game did they play? And then by figuring out what game they played when they were on the island, you can try to figure out what game they would appreciate or want to see you playing. So, for example, a
Hmm.
lot of the jury members, Carla, Jesse, Cody, they were people who were perceived as making a lot of big moves, perceived as having agency in this game. So, if you're trying to swing their votes, that means that you're probably thinking, how did I have agency in this game? So, how can I go and get their votes? So, sometimes you might have someone who might completely not align with your game whatsoever. Maybe you were fighting back and forth at like in camp. Maybe you just don't connect. Maybe you never talk strategy and you don't think you can get their vote. If you think you can get someone else's vote, it is not worth your time to cater to that one person. Instead of casting your net wide, you need to just cast to get the votes that you can get.
Hmm. It's interesting in terms of that everybody in the jury had like check boxes they wanted each player to say. It's interesting. You have to sort of like, even if like the people on the jury do not have the right perception, there is kind of like this idea of like, oh, okay, well, we want to hear Gabler say blah, 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 blah. We want to hear this person say, and you kind of have to like be able to figure out like what it is that the jury wants to hear you say, even if it's not necessarily like the truth of what you believe.
Mm-hmm. So that's even of the way that you approach Final Tribal, right? Final Tribal is still part of the game, which means that unless like you're lying about something morally, if you want to lie to win, that is still a viable option because the game of Survivor is to win the game of Survivor.
Hmm.
So you're the one who sets the rules about how you are going to win that game, right? So for me, I didn't want to go and lie about what Final Tribal. That's just something which a restriction that I placed on myself. That is not the game's restriction that placed on myself. It's me. You have someone then, Chris Daughtery, way back when, who played in Vanuatu. What was that, season 9, I
9.
believe? He lied at Final
Niner.
Tribal because he knew he needed to get the votes. And that is still a part of the game. Final Tribal, the game is not done until Jeff starts reading those votes. So you are still allowed to lie. If you know that the jury wants to hear something and you want to get that vote, you can lie to get that vote if you know what they're wanting to hear. Of course, when you're lying, there's always that risk of getting caught in a lie, especially since the jury now cross information back and forth with each other. So you need to be wary about what lies you're going to be saying if you choose to lie to the jury. But it's still viable because, like I said, the point of Survivor is to win the game.
I think you did something that I think is kind of similar to what Gabler was able to do at the Final Tribal Council, where that you highlighted about how like, hey, one of the things that you noticed in the game was that the younger players were not getting a lot of room to work, and so you adjusted your game to sort of fit in line with that. And I think that that was another example of a person being able to sort of like talk about what they are doing, and that doesn't come at a way where you are not taking the credit away from anybody who's sitting on the jury.
Exactly. Like, and I think that's something also is important as well, where it's like, if you're going to downplay, if you're going to try to explain why you were not seen as a threat, you need to have a reason and tangible examples as well, too, where you just can't be like, yeah, I just decided not to be a threat, just not to be a threat. You need to still be able to show some sort of agency and to show that it was a part of your game. So what Gabler did was he said it perfectly. The Ellie vote, I drove this Ellie vote. I put myself out there. I knew that I had to bring myself lower if I wanted to continue forward in this game. So this is why I went lower in the threat rankings, because I knew I had to do that. And here are still some examples that showed that I was still playing that game when I was low. That's something which as well as which I did too, where it's like a lot of the younger players were being voted out, and that's because they were loud spoken and trying to strategize. I knew for other reasons as myself that I had to go take more of a backseat driver, but you could see that I was still strategizing and I showed agency, especially with Omer's vote out. So I still have those moves in that story. You want to make sure you have a narrative that is clear for the jury to understand, and that's something that Gabler did perfectly.
Okay. Gabler's win is such an interesting one and an unusual one. Do you have any sort of like historical perspective in terms of like Gabler as the winner of a season, in terms of somebody who's just like completely out of nowhere?
I think that Gabler has many parallels between both Gabon
Hmm.
and Nicaragua.
Yeah.
I think in that place, especially like number one, I think Gabon's more like the more holistic part, but especially in the sense where Fabio in Nicaragua kind of played a game. Then he's like, "Yeah, I'm kind of a surfer dude." It's like I was really thinking though about the game, and then even though I might not have been the most strategic person, I'm here at the end, and like I was still helping other people. Like I was still being a part of the strategy, and that's what kind of got him to the end.
Yeah.
That's the same with Gabler, where Gabler was like, "Okay, I was Al Gabler. I went down, and I was always true to myself, and I still played strategy, and here I am at the end."
Yeah, I was thinking about this last night, and Nicaragua came to mind also because I think that also similarly to Survivor Nicaragua, that Holly was the person that I think was the okay. Well, she was supposed to win, and
Mhm.
she ultimately ends up going out at the final four. And then you end up with this final three that was kind of like, well, nobody thought that the final three would be Fabio, Sash, and Chase Rice.
Mhm.
And then ultimately, like they go with somebody who felt like had no blood on their hands, and the person who was able to kind of give very honest answers about that could sort of like explain what he was doing, even if it was not the most strategic game out there.
Mhm.
And they just went with a person that they had like really positive feelings towards.
Exactly. And like I said multiple times, and I'll say it again, especially because I feel as if the sentiment is that there's always a sentiment about what is constitutes a deserving winner. And I think that's a false sentiment. I think that if you win, you deserve it. And this is me about to go on one more rant. I promise you, last one. But the point about Survivor, which I think people forget, is that you want to win Survivor. You don't need to be the most strategic person to win. If you get the most strategic person out, you can still win. You don't need to be the most physical. You just need to get yourself to that end of the seat. So that means that if when other people are saying, "Oh, this person should have won," and that person did not make it to the final tribal seat, maybe because they were seen as too big of a threat, got taken out, that it doesn't matter because they're not the ones who are at the final three. It's the person who's sitting at the end who deserves to win because they were able to go to that end. And I know that's a hot topic, a hot opinion, because people might be like, this person's not deserving because they weren't strategic. This person was not here. This person was more strategic. But the thing is, a lot of times that person is not the one who is sitting in those seats. And in addition, it is up to the jury to go and decide what values they want to see in their winner. We as viewers might disagree with that value, but we are the viewers, we are not the players. Each season is by itself in its entirety, where 41 is just its own bubble, 42 is just its own bubble, 43 is just its own bubble. So yes, sometimes the check marks that people want to see are similar, where a lot of people might be like, I want to see strategy, I want to see physicality, I want to see social game. But if a season decides to just go off the trails and go with something which is different, not saying that's 43, that is up to the players and the season's choices, right?
Hmm.
And that is up to you as a player to recognize what type of jury you're having. That is up to you as a player to realize, to recognize, what does that jury want to see. You can't go into the game, go into the final three, and expect that it's going to be the same as all the past seasons, because you're not the past seasons. You're your own season.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. I think a lot of times I see that the viewers feel like that I know better than this jury. This jury, like, they didn't see what I was seeing. And yeah, there are things in that maybe you saw as a viewer that the jury didn't see. But when
Mm-hmm.
it's so lopsided like this, I feel a little bit like, who am I to quibble with the jury that was there?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's like no one accidentally wins at a large margin. Like like that's just not something that happens, because let's say someone did accidentally go and vote for the wrong person. That means that you'd have to have, if it's a
A
margin of
topaz.
7. Topaz, I know, that's rest in peace Topaz, but that was a close vote too.
That
BB
was a
can
close vote.
everyone. But for
Yes.
this one, it's like, let's say there's a Topaz in the season. That'd make it then, so it was supposed to be 6-2. Gabler still wins. 2 Topazes, 5-3. Gabler still wins. So
Hmm.
that shows that there is a reason that Gabler still won, because what that jury showed is that jury of Survivor 43 thought that Gabler deserved to win. And that jury is isolated in itself.
So I want to talk about something that I think is very interesting. So we saw that Gabler goes on to win 7-1.
Mm-hmm.
Maryanne Oketch wins 7-1.
Mm-hmm.
Erica wins 7-1.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something going on? 3 is a trend now. Is there something going on here in the new era that is making for all of these votes to be 7-1?
I think so, but I don't even think it's just the new era. I think that if we expand the bounds a little further, of instead of like a 87.5% win success to even past seasons, this is a trend that's happened before.
Hmm.
I'll pull it back to season 37, David versus Goliath. Nick won with a 70% mark, like a 30% margin, so 70%, right? So I'll just say the percentage of votes he got. Nick got 70% of the votes. Chris Underwood, got 69% of the votes, around that 7. Tommy Sheehan got, I think, 70% of the votes, and Tony won with 75% of the votes.
Hmm.
So we're still seeing that around 70 to 85% voting margin of the people who think of
Yeah.
how people deserve to
Not
win.
since Dom and Wendell have we had a close vote.
Exactly. Not since Dom and Wendell. And so there was Dom and Wendell, and even Ben and Chrissy, everyone got votes. And I think that was the last time that all of the final 3 got votes, correct?
I believe so.
Okay. So I think that it's very interesting, because then, as someone who made it to final tribal, I can't speak on why the juries are going and voting, because I'd never experienced that. But it does seem that there might be
What a
some sort.
flex.
I know it sounded like a flex, but there obviously is some sort of trend that is being shifted towards how the jury is voting and what the margins is of the jury are voting. Maybe it has to do with either campaigning when people are at Ponderosa. Maybe it has to do with like the collaboration of how the jury discusses what they want to see. But there's clearly something that's going, which shows how people are voting, and it is very interesting.
Yeah, because there's no like deliberation with the jury after the final tribal council.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess everybody is there and everybody's like deliberating like in front of the final 3.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if they sort of like reach a group consensus and then go and vote. I feel like that the first time they ever did this in Survivor Game Changers, I do feel like that it was a little bit of like 2 factions sort of like arguing for Brad or for Sarah, but we
Mm-hmm.
really haven't had that since then.
Yeah.
I'm trying to maybe in Ghost Island.
Yes. Yes. And it feels, I think that the thought of the jury saying we had a check boxes and we just wanted to vote on who filled those check boxes, I think shows kind of like a leaning towards the jury all kind of respects the same sort of game, which is
Mm-hmm.
why you're seeing these large margins of votes where you're seeing so for example where it's like if you have a it's like a scavenger hunt. If we all have the same scavenger hunt list, we're all going to it's the things that we pick are all going to be similar and the same. There might be a little bit of variation, but it'll be the same. But if everyone has different scavenger lists and don't talk about what lists they have, then it's going to be vastly different. And that's maybe when you're going to be seeing the differences of people's games, the differences of people's games, the differences of people how they're voting as well too. So I think that because the jury's able to go and discuss what do I value, what do I do this, there can become a consensus of who they want to see their winner to be.
Maryanne, what else from the final tribal council really stood out to you?
Um, what about the final tribal council? Do you want to talk about fire now or later?
Yeah, let's talk about it because I know you have extensive notes, and so yeah, and so like I would love to, I don't know what's like were the hot topics for you,
Yeah.
no pun intended.
So for me, one of the hot topics, which I think even was the jury talked about, was they were going and they raised the criticism that Cassidy should have gone to fire to take out Jesse.
Yeah.
This is something which I think it's more than just fire. It looks like so it's more than just fire. Let me explain what I mean when I say that, because people can just be like, well, it's just fire making. So the point of fire making, I believe, was to give those big players one final chance to earn their way to the end. But since the past seasons, and especially with Chris Underwood going and taking fire as well, taking himself out of the individual immunity and going to do fire, it seems like now that is some sort of viable option to go and add something to your resume.
Right.
I strongly disagree with that statement. Unless you are like Chris Underwood, you have that awareness that you need to have something big. But I think for a lot of players who played the game in its entirety, fire should not be seen as a final big move. And here's why. Number one, fire is something that is very, very volatile. Like, let's say, for example, the wind is blowing in one way and it's not blowing another way. You could lose fire just on weather conditions. It's so, and a second thing as well, too, is I think that the thought of going and to fire to add a move in your resume, I think has another underlying conversation about how players and juries members see agency in this game. Gabler took Jesse out at fire and made it to the final three, yes, but Cassidy was the one who went and chose Gabler to then do and make that fire. So just because Gabler went and made that fire, does that mean that it had nothing to do with Cassidy, even though Cassidy was the one who made that decision? I personally do not think so, because in Survivor, a lot of times it's a social game and you need many people to go and make that move. So yes, Gabler got his hands dirty, and I think that he should be able to go and talk about that. But I think that choosing that person to go and do your dirty work is something that also should not be just undervalued.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100% that I feel like that, why should Cassidy have to earn her way to the final three twice? That I feel like that's very unfair. She punched her ticket. She should be there. I wonder if maybe the way she framed it didn't help her, because she basically framed it as to Jesse and then to the final tribal council, that she framed it as, look, I feel like that my game, and I'm paraphrasing, speaks for itself, that I didn't play the kind of game that I needed another big flashy move, where obviously, like, in the eyes of the jury, they felt like that she did need more. So I think they're like, okay, well, she doesn't get how we perceive her, because if she did, she would have done that. Whereas I feel like that maybe she could have framed it as that I put Gabler in the position to take out Jesse, because that's what I always did. I wasn't the person out in front making the move. I was the person behind the scenes putting the pieces in position to do exactly what I wanted. And this was another example of how I did that, by using Gabler to my advantage and having him take all the risk while I sat back and was able to capitalize on what happened.
I think you summed that up perfectly, Rob.
Oh, thank you.
I think that the way that you articulate also makes a big difference. So because let's say, for example, what's your favorite food, Rob?
Oh, it's not really a food podcast.
Just
Pizza.
Pizza. So you might like pizza, but I think you're wrong. I think fries are the best, and I think that the often that I eat fries are is the reason why I think fries are the best. Do you feel more willing to go and have fries?
Fries or poutine?
I know I did have poutine earlier today. Exactly.
Mhm.
So if you're going and you just if someone has a differing view, like a differing view than you, and you're just stating why you think you're right without going and relating to that person, you don't have there's a very lower chance that you're going to go and sway them to your opinion. If I said, "Oh yeah, Rob, pizza. Oh my goodness, I'm actually going to take the poutine idea. Pizza. Oh, that's so great. You probably love the crust of the pizza and you probably love the cheese. That's why I love poutine as well too, because even there's cheese as well too. Then you have like the starch and potatoes. So like even though I might not like the pizza, you can see that some parts of the pizza that you respect, I have in my poutine. So maybe you want to try poutine some other time. If you relate to what that jury is trying to hear you say, which is like what something that a lot of people thought that Cassidy didn't do, she might have had a higher chance. So a lot of the jury were like, "Oh, Cassidy, you like exactly what you said. You should have gone to fire because you needed that big move." Instead of Cassidy being like, "I didn't need that big move." Yes, fire can be perceived as a big move, but instead, I went and slipped under the radar and made someone do that move for me. I made someone take the risk, put themselves in the burn because I'm the string bearer. Because then they'll be like, she recognizes it's a way to make a move, and this is how she made that move. So we're not so different.
Mhm. Yeah, and I would love to go have poutine with you. That would be, such a fun afternoon.
You know what to do, Rob, if you want to have poutine with me. I don't need to say it.
What do I have to oh, okay, come to Canada.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. All right, well, let's keep talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, like, the Cassidy curse, that was something that I wonder if that came after the season, because I feel like that could have been her Allie Gabler.
Mm-hmm. I think there is a lot of like there is some sort of credence into getting the person who you're targeting out, even if you're not the one steering that vote. I
Mhm.
think that that is something that a point that is raised, and I think that, like I said, depending on the jury, it's something that can be put up as well too. Like Cassidy getting all the people who are targeting her out is something that she could have gone and used more if the jury was open to it. And because I know that in my season, I always got the target who I always wanted out was out. Maybe it was because of other things that were happening around. Maybe it was because of only solely me, but that's what happened. And a lot of times when having those discussions, I did have some sort of part or play in it, in the sense where it's like if I was super adamant, someone like that I wanted this person out and I was writing this name down because of my social connections and relations, other people might be like, "Oh, well, I want to do this, but like I really don't want to get ostracized, Maryanne. So maybe this is actually a good idea. Let's talk about other things, see this, and let's see if it works." Where it's like getting your input, no matter you just want some sort of sliver or stake in the claim, and to recognize how much of that stake you have, so that when you say had 5%, I did 5% of this move, people are like, yeah, that's right, I'd give her 5%, I'd give her 5%. But if I said I had 100% of this move, people, instead of just being like, no, you had 5%, they'd be like, no, you had 0% of this move, what are you talking about? So it's trying to realize, like, so if Cassidy was like, yes, I didn't steer all these votes, but I like they were targeting me, so I wanted them out, and I was whispering and I was strategizing. So I might not have been steering them, but with the input that I had, it helped influence other people, of course, with other factors, to go and vote that person out. That might have had more credence than wanting to like then stating just whoever I wanted out got out, because it devalues the jury members what they did. Because then they're like, wait, no, why are you trying to say that, Cassidy? Like I did that, and then it kind of has that disconnect that we could have seen in that final tribal.
Mhm. Yeah, the whole idea about that Cassidy got out people that were coming for her, which became known as the Cassidy curse.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I wonder if she had that kind of branding out there where she could have, like, in the same way that Allie Gabler really became, oh yeah, that is what he did. Like, I kind of feel like that having like a slogan for it, I feel like might have been something that also would have helped Jess craft this narrative around her
Mm-hmm.
game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And did you have anything like that?
Um, I didn't. I think that
You didn't need it.
no, I did no. I wasn't gonna say I think that I didn't need it. I think it'd be great. But I think that's one thing that also raised about Gabler's game because he had branding. He didn't just have a story, right? He wasn't like, I had to do this and this and this and went out. He said he could just say, I'm the alligator. What does that mean? This is what it means. And every time he mentions the alligator, people are reminded of the strategy that he had. Oh, alligator, yes, down and up. The alligator, down and up. So it helps with the branding to understand, to say concisely what your game is. It's not something that's needed, but like maybe now future players listening to this podcast, if you're able to go and have some sort of relation with, okay, this is my game summed up in one sentence. So when I say it in short form, I can put it in pretty much every answer and remind people, this is what I played. This is what I played. This is what I played. I actually, you know what? When speaking on that, I think that it's not a play down on what Cassidy did. I think it actually raises Gabler's game more, that he had that branding and that recognition. And I think that's something that we actually might see happen in future seasons.
Yeah. Yeah, I spoke with Gabler this morning,
Mm-hmm.
and I talked about how Gabler made I thought like an all-time like halftime adjustment in his game,
Mm-hmm.
where and he talked about that, and what he said was that basically he said that he was trying to play kind of like, or he thought he was playing kind of like a Rupert-esque game in the first
Mm-hmm.
half, of which I think tracks, but then he said he really shifted into playing a more Sandra-like game in
Mm-hmm.
the second half, where and it was interesting because he sort of like had played like a kind of a sloppy, messy first half of the game,
Mm-hmm.
where people felt like, okay, Gabler, he can't win, he's a great person to go to the end with, and then stop doing all the things that made him like so messy and clumsy and a potential person to take to the end, and then also started playing like a very much, okay, use me,
Mm-hmm.
I am a vote, and was able to sort of like that he had sort of like the upside of like, hey, drag me to the end, I'm a goat, and then he was able to play a subtle enough game that he was able to like win all those votes at the end of the game.
I agree with that completely. And I think this actually goes back to live know-it-alls, Rob, when I specifically said one thing about Gabler is if you don't get him out in the next few votes until final 8, most likely he's going to be going and taken to the end. This
Yes.
was something that even with him speaking, he used that to his advantage. He laid low, and then in the final 8, a lot of people and a lot of viewers were like, "Oh yeah, Gabler's most likely going to go and make it to the make sit on one of those 3 chairs because who's going to go and vote him out?" But now recognize being able to go and articulate that that was your strategy is like a mind-blowing thing as well too, where it's like, oh my gosh, it's like that, because that's great strategy, because I think like one of the reasons in the game is you want to just get to one of those final 3 seats in any way that you can when still having a narrative that the jury will respect. So I think that it was spectacular. I think that Anybody But Me with Sandra was also a good move as well, especially since he did also have those social connections. Yes, a lot of times those social connections might have thought, oh, he's number 3 in our 3. But the thing is, he's the one who made it to the end and not those social connections. Or out of the group of people that he made it to the end, he still had that narrative.
Yeah. So I think that the Gabler thing is just very interesting. Where he just like he was very unself-aware for a good portion of the game, and then he seemingly like did have like an interesting self-awareness of that he sort of knew where the power players were, and that
Mhm.
like he knew what people wanted from him, and
Mhm.
ultimately like I think he did kind of see this path to the end. And going back to that when I talked to Adam on the podcast, like we talked about how like this was the first time that Gabler was really like, I'm hiding in plain sight,
Mhm.
and he talked to Owen after Owen was blindsided at the Noel vote, and he was like, Owen, it's not over, I got a final 3 of who it was going to be, and Owen said yeah, and the final 3 that Gabler had was Gabler, Owen, and Cassidy. So,
Mhm.
you know, Gabler did have some like agency in sort of like, okay, this is ultimately, the group that I want to get to the end of the game with.
Exactly. Like, perfectly exactly. That is saying, like, especially when he said I had 2 paths to the end, where it's like I got my preferred path to the end, but I still had an alternative path to the end to get me sitting there as well too. Like, being able to be in many options, be in many moves really does show that agency. And I think it's something that also happened in my game as well too, where it's like I had that path with me, Omar and Romeo, but I just kicked Romeo, and then I changed my ideal final three, where it was me, Romeo, Jonathan. But then after still, the actual final three was me, Romeo, and Mike, where it's like showing I had those paths to the end because I was playing that game. You might not have been seeing it, but clearly it happened because I'm sitting here and someone can fact check with all the moves that I have is still a part of playing that game, especially since to a viewer like me, it seemed that the jury really had an emphasis on agency in this and in what they were looking for.
Yeah, I just think that like as we go back and like we'll go over this a bunch of times, like he was somebody who was discounted
Mhm.
for whatever reasons. And if we go
Mhm.
back to like maybe like a Sandra, like heroes versus villains, Sandra, and maybe she also was like discounted of like, okay, well, we're not worried about her. She's not going to win a challenge. She also
Mhm.
has won before, so she's not somebody who is like a big threat at the end of the game. And then ultimately, you get there, and then she ends up being a person who was a bigger jury threat than certainly Russell could have imagined.
Mhm. Exactly. Exactly. And because like the thing about Survivor is if you're the only jury threat management that matters is for the players that are in the game.
Yeah.
If the players in the game don't think you're a threat, but you manage to go and convey to the jury that you are a threat or you do have a viable game, that it matters, you know? So like especially that's the thing that pointed out as well too, where Gabler stated that he felt that Ellie underestimated him, but that was okay in that moment. That's great because it's like if you're underestimated by the players, it gives you a higher chance to make it to the next round. And the more rounds you make, the higher chance that you go and sit in the end. So then the question isn't, how do I get to the end? It's, how do I let the jury see what I've done to get to the end? And that's a better question, in my opinion, than how do I get to the end?
Mm-hmm. Maryanne, the thing that I think is so interesting about this whole Gabler journey is that you go back to the first episode, and I feel like that the history of Survivor, when we talk about like the Survivor gods, that there's so many like interesting, cool coincidences like this where Gabler could have been the first person voted out of the game. He threw himself on the sword. He said, "Hey, everybody, I let the group down. Vote me out. I'm going to play my shot in the dark." And Ellie said, "No, Gabler, I will save you. I will save you." And in those two things, like one, Ellie ruined her own game because she kept in the man who ultimately is going to destroy her.
Mm-hmm.
And then ultimately, Gabler goes on to win the season. Poor Mariah, the curse of the M's, as you predicted. We'll be on the lookout for that in season 44 for
Mm-hmm.
sure. Maybe, if Mariah just had a different name, all of this goes differently. But isn't that just so interesting that I feel like that there's so many times where the person they should have been the first boot, going back to the very first winner of the show,
Mm-hmm.
and that they go on to win the season.
It's because the game, it's like a butterfly effect where so many things like go and build into one again and again and again and again. Where that's also a thing where maybe because Gabler bungled it up so early in the game, people really underestimated him, which
Yeah.
made him seem less than like a strategic or a physical threat, which let him get further, right? Maybe he doesn't bungle up. Maybe people are saying, no, Gabler's someone to watch for and then vote him out early. It just, but these moves, you can't even, I think, regret the decision that you have at the time because there's so many chains that will go and lead to it. A very good example, a lot of people ask Omar, do you now regret keeping Maryanne over Lydia at that tribal because Maryanne went to vote you out and win the game? And every single time Omar says, no, I don't regret that because it's so early in the game. You're not thinking, okay, well, if I vote Lydia out, then Maryanne's then indebted to me, and then she's going to be sad, and then she's going to build up resentment, and then vote me out, and then she's going to do this. That's not how people think of the game. You think in stages of the game, right?
Hmm.
So I think it's very interesting because it shows that a lot of moving pieces can happen where it's like the perception that you have at the beginning of the game can be shifted to what it's different in the end of the game. So it's like you're never out until you're out.
Hmm. And Gabler also just like is this interesting person where he was more of like I don't know if I want to say like a social outcast in the first half of
Mm-hmm.
the game, but he was somebody who was like it wasn't necessarily like where we saw that Daniel ran into problems where it was like people couldn't trust him last season.
Mhm.
That he just sort of was like, he was a guy who was like incredibly honest, where like I think that was something that people really were impressed with, like his honesty in their relationships with
Mhm.
him. But he was also like just kind of, as Owen described him, like a bull in a china shop. So I
Mhm.
don't think that people really looked at him as like a serious contender in the first half of the game. And it just like was able, I'm just trying to think, could you intentionally Gabler this thing?
Hmm. I think you honest you can, but there's just so many things that happen in the game, right? Like pre-merge, one of the things that what that was great for Gabler's game is because the guys wanted to go and take Ellie and Janine out in pre-merge, one of the two. Like Sammy really wanted to do that because he felt as if he was being underestimated and used Gabler as that number. Even when people were being like, "Oh, I don't want to work with Gabler," it's like Gabler is that number, right? So there's many different factors where it's like, let's say, for example, the status quo didn't change in Baka. And then after most likely Ellie and Janine and Owen and maybe Sammy then went and looped in, and then Gabler would have then been out for the personality traits that his fellow castmates then went and spoke about. Where it's like it wasn't just Gabler's conversation. Yes, it did lower his level, but there were other factors as well too that benefited him.
Hmm. Yeah. You know, another thing with the new era, as we're like processing all of this, is that I think we, in the last couple seasons, have not paid enough attention to the like mergatory vote. I
Mhm.
think it ends up being like a really big deal. Obviously, in this
Mhm.
season, it ends up being Gabler's signature round of voting, where he
Mhm.
ends up getting Ellie out of the game. He is somebody who does not have a vote. Oh, I'm sorry, who is not up for grabs.
Mhm.
Ellie was somebody who her name was eligible to be voted for. I think she ends up trying to do stuff where then I think it's easy to turn it around on her because she is vulnerable and also
Mhm.
trying to play both sides, and it comes back around on her. But in your season, obviously, like this was a very important round in the game.
Mhm.
Omer, who doesn't have a vote in your season, ends up like really using this to like lay the groundwork for what he wants to do. But also, Jesse didn't have a vote in this last round, and then also I think that was something that also helped him hide in the post merge game based on the exit interviews that I was doing.
Mhm. Exactly. I think the most optimal thing for the mergatory is to be safe and to not have your vote because you can cash in checks that you can never deliver and that can get you more bonds. That's one thing that Omar had such, of course, you need to be able to have the social capital, which Jesse and Omar did have, that people want to go and work with you and people want to play with you. But if you do have that social capital, that social game, and you are able to go and cash all these unchecked checks, it gives you so many options in the game to go and move forward. So I think that, especially because this is the first time when so many people are bonding and connecting with each other, you're seeing people seeing, oh, I want to work with this group. Oh, I want to work with another group. And you could even see there was a bit of what am I trying to say? Like majority alliance trying to be working in both seasons where we had a distinct one in our season. And then there was a lot of talk about, okay, we're gonna first vote out Ellie, then we're gonna actually go and bring Vessi together with Baka, and then so you have these majorities and these conversations which also are going on as well too. So being able to just get into as many conversations as you can when you know you're safe, that's the best way how to play this game.
Hmm. I would love to get your take on. We haven't really talked about Jesse and Carla too
Mhm.
much, who were such big figures in the season. Let me
Mhm.
start with Jesse and get your perspective. Of course, Jesse had like this really great post merge
Mhm.
part of the game, culminating in the Cody blindside at the final six. In the real time,
Mhm.
how were you feeling about that move?
I think
As
that
somebody who also made a very big move at the
yes.
final six.
I think that was the best move for Jesse to make in the end, especially when looking at exit interviews when a lot of people said, "Oh, like Cody was a challenge threat. Like, what happens if he made it to Final Four?" Still think that Jesse, that was his most optimal move to take Cody out, because taking Cody out guaranteed him to the final four, at least guaranteed him to make fire. So his problem then was making fire. I think that especially if he's viewed that Cody was the one that he needed to take out, I think that that was a very good move to do.
Mm-hmm. As somebody who not only made a big move at the final six, but also had a hidden immunity idol, emphasis on the hidden in your possession, did you have any issues with the way that Jesse handled the final five?
Sorry, I'm still thinking about the final six.
Yes.
I think it's a great move. But one final thought. I think that the only thing that Jesse could have done a little better is if he managed to give the other players, Owen, Cassidy, Gabler, a little more agency, like make them feel a little bit more agency, then that would have been better for him to set up to 5. Because the more people who feel that they're in the move, the better it is to then maintain your threat level in the game. Because like I said, it only matters what people say outside of the game. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm done with final six now.
Yeah. So, but interestingly, you and Jesse have like this somewhat like similar trajectory, and he probably had a bigger target on his back after the move that he made, even though yours is very impressive as well. You had a hidden immunity idol too, which you did not feel compelled to play at your final five. So I would just love to get, and again, Jesse did not see the end game of Survivor 42 before he played in season 43. So what do you think about the way that Jesse handled that situation, the final five with an idol?
So I think that the way that Jesse handled it was great for showing his agency in the final five, because even though the votes were not going his way, he showed, I have agency. I'm the one who's controlling this vote, which is good for what you're trying to show the jury. The bad thing is it showed every single player that's still in the game, hey, I'm the one to beat. Hello, it's me who's the one to beat. Right. So what people are saying, and one thing which would be great, like might have been better in a good strategy, of course, with a belly full, nights of sleep, lots of math, like lots of thinking, is if you manage to keep both Jesse and Carla in the final five, then maybe that could be something that works to get you to the final four. But another concern about that is a lot of people, Carla was literally limping, like hurt, but this girl won immunities. She kept on finding advantages, right? So clearly that is a concern that Jesse did have. So then for final five, if you're trying to go and make it to the if you're so adamant about making fire, which of course is me, because I always go with get out of fire as much, like do not have to make fire if you don't have to. That's my stance. But then the best thing for Jesse to have done, I guess, would be to either first just play the idol to make himself safe and get Carla home, and just say that you found the idol at the merge beach and you were hiding about that. Then at final trial, will be like, actually, I lied. This idol was not from the merge beach. It was from right?
Yes.
Because then
you're stretching the secrets.
Yes, because that stretches the secrets for 2 more days. But if you keep that for 2 more days, you can then be like, this was actually this is actually your idol, Janine. This is actually I was actually playing. This was from Dwight. Your idol had this. It looks like this, Janine. So I promise you it's yours. It was yellow. This. So try to keep that hidden, because you want but this of course is going on the stance where you do not want to make fire. If Jesse was viewing, I just need to make it to the final four and then practice on my fire making skills, then you can go and have that. Then you can go and really show your agency to everyone. I remember I even spoke to, that's one of the reasons why I didn't play my idol for Lindsay, because if I did play my idol for Lindsay, there was a chance that I would have to go and make fire. And I tried to avoid fire like the plague. Like I did not want to make fire whatsoever, because I just did not want to risk my 25 days on something that lasts for 4 minutes.
Yeah, for sure. So Jesse ultimately, that he ends up playing the idol for himself in that spot. Certainly the right decision, because Carla could have done, I think we would have been talking about this, like one of the greatest Survivor moves of all time had Jesse played the idol on Carla.
I think, like I said,
can we just talk that through? Because that was, so Gabler, Owen, and Cassidy vote for Carla.
Yeah.
Had Jesse played his idol on Carla in that spot, Carla wrote down Jesse's name and Jesse wrote down Cassidy's name, correct? So
I think
ultimately, we would end up, and I'll chat, let me know if I'm getting anything wrong. So we'd end up with what would have been, one vote Jesse, one vote Carla. Now, all right, revote. And Carla's like, hey, like, let's get this guy.
Exactly.
And he's like, I just played an idol on you.
I think that vote move for Carla, if it worked out, would be, I think that was Carla's best strategic move to do, to double cross Jesse.
Yes.
I think that was so good. But of course, Carla was put in a corner and she just had to throw everything, and something would stick and some things wouldn't stick. Like, so I remember she was trying to talk with like Cassidy, trying to emotionally manipulate her. She tried to, and I think even in exit interviews, Carla was saying that she tried to say that Jesse's idol was fake. Right. But then last but not least, she started to go write down Jesse's name as well, too. So there were so many things that Carla was throwing, and some of them would have stuck. But then after, because she thought about too many options, there was a risk that, what am I trying to say? There was a risk that something that would it'd stick, then you knock it off. And that's what I think happened in Carla's case.
And Jesse did vote for Carla in that spot.
Exactly.
So it wasn't a 1-1 tie. So that one vote would have been enough to send Jesse home had Jesse played the idol for Carla.
Exactly.
I had thought that maybe that it made some sense for that Jesse to say to Carla, hey, I have the idol. Get all the votes on me. I'll write down Cassidy's name. But I asked him about that. He said he was more worried about Carla than in the episode. It sort of made it seem like that he was more concerned about Cassidy potentially than Carla. But he said, no, he was terrified of Carla.
I think that makes total sense about why he was terrified of Carla. If you look at the story that is shown about Carla, at first she's hesitant, then she's like, you know what, I'm here to play. Then she gets that idol, has a great strategic game, has the great social game, has immunity wins. Then after, she's immediately blindsided. And then from being blindsided, yes, you've knocked her down. But if she gets back up and makes it to final tribal, I was blindsided at the final 6. I didn't know what was going on, but I still made it to one of these final 3 seats. That is a story that the jury can go and relate to. That is a story that shows agency. That's the story that shows resiliency, even after you're kicked down, that you're still picked back up. And I feel the jury would really, really relate to that story as well. So I understand as well why Jesse was very, very concerned about Carla.
Boy, Maryanne, you should be a final 3 coach. Should they have you out there that like, all right, here's the day 39 breakfast and here's Maryanne.
Oh my gosh.
Maryanne is going to help all of the jurors formulate their day 26 breakfast. I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you.
And like, you're going to formulate what you're going to say. I mean, who loses in this? Gonna get great final tribal council.
Yes.
Is the jury a lot to think about?
I think that the person who loses is me. And this, let me go a little egotistical, because that's the thing about the way that I played, was that every single night from the final 8 forward, I always thought about the jury. I was like, who just went to the jury? What type of game did they play? And how can I convince them that they're going to vote for me? And if I could convince, I formulate that final tribal speech. This is something which I was really, really thinking about. So yes, you can or go and articulate your speech, and you can maybe formulate something in one day. But I think that it's not something that like you can do master perfect. Like a lot of people can master perfectly with just like an afternoon of thinking. Like, yes, you can maybe get a good speech. You can maybe recognize your game a little bit more, recognize the authenticity. But I think that a part of the game as well, too, where I personally think it's a little bit of too much interference. Because let's say, for example, one reason why I felt more comfortable, even though Mike was in the final 3, was that I felt as if he did not understand the game that he played as well as maybe he thought that he played that game, right? Where he really felt he played an honest game, but I felt as if that was a little different than what the jury would perceive. But I did that about thinking about that. Let's say that you did have a Maryanne come in and speak to the jury about the final 3, about this is how you should speak, this is how, think about your game, think about your story. That might change the way that people go to final tribal. And if you as a player are thinking, okay, out of the people who are in the end, Do I think that maybe someone might have a game that jury members might go and respect, but aren't able to articulate it as well as I can articulate my game? That will then go put a disadvantage on that player who's thinking about the multiple
Right.
angles rather than just the surface resume.
And foolishly, I'm basically saying like, well, why not have a bird there, and the bird can then tell everybody else how to fly.
Yes.
It would
I-
not work.
Like it might have some effect to it. I think
Mhm.
you'd have some effect to it as well too, where it's like because people can learn a lot at Final Tribal when the jury starts speaking to them. That's something which I think that Mike understood. Mike started to understand his game more after the Final Tribal. But at the time he realized, oh, this is how people were perceiving me, and this is what I should say. It was too late, right? If he started to think about that earlier in the day, I might have been up the creek with no paddle, right?
Mhm.
So it's like more like you're taking a bird and there's other birds and you're like,
Oh, well, Omer is going to be psyched.
yeah, I know. And you're kicking the bird out of the nest, right? So
Yes.
some birds are going to fly, then some
Mhm.
birds just aren't going to be ready to fly. Then
You
some
know,
birds are going to be like, these losers, I knew they weren't going to fly, but you kicked them out and now they can fly. And now, so I'm up the creek because I was the only one who secretly could fly.
mhm. Okay. Speaking of Omer,
Mm-hmm.
Omer had tweeted last night, and he basically was like crowing. Speaking of birds, that he felt like that he during his stint here on the Survivor Know It Alls mentioned that he saw some Maryanne in Gabler,
Mm-hmm.
and he wanted credit for saying that as Gabler was the winner of the season. And so I would love to hear, do you feel like in any ways that Gabler was like a Maryanne?
I can understand exactly where Omer's coming from, where personality might overshadow every other aspect of your game. Where a lot of people saw Gabler first as his personality, then thought about his game, which kind of gives you a place to hide because it's like, oh, that's just Maryanne. She's eclectic. She's excited. Oh, that's just Gabler. Like he's kind of out there. He's super honest. Like that's who he is, right? So that gives you a shield when you're doing your strategy because that's what people think of you first. Like there's players in my season who, like, I remember were like, oh, Maryanne wasn't really strategizing because they didn't see past that shield that I had, put a little bit of my personality and a little bit just based on who I am just as a person, right?
Hmm.
So I see that both in Gabler and in me. But then also being able to go and be like, hey, I have this shield, which is my personality, but like, look, here I am. Here's all the undercurrents of me that show that I am a player. Gabler was able to execute that well. And I also think that I was able to execute that as well. So I would say that there are similarities between us.
Yes. Okay. In my conversation with Owen this
Mm-hmm.
morning, Owen said that I talked to Owen about sort of the highs and lows that he experienced during the game, and he cited about how you said that the game is like a roller coaster. However, you said that you were going to be riding it with your arms up in the air, and you were going to really enjoy
Mm-hmm.
those highs and lows. Is that something that that Owen was not able to do as well as you were?
I think that being able to pick yourself back up when being kicked down is something that is a very big thing to do, where even when you're sad, rock bottom, you can't show that to the players because if you show that to the players, they might not want to work with you unless it's something that is very in a strategic way where it's like, please use me. I want to be used. I want to play. A lot of times, from what I've seen with Owen, he'd be kicked down. He'd be like, dang, I got kicked down again. This sucks. It all sucks. And the players are seeing that, but they're not, but players might not have been seeing, yes, this sucks, but I still want to play. This sucks, but like it's a part of the game. Let's move forward. So I think that being able to go and show people with those lows is very important as well too. Where it because I think that it is very important to be in some way, shape, or form integrated with the tribe.
Yeah. Did you ever have a moment in Survivor 42 where you were angry or just mad about the way events had turned?
Angry or mad? I was like a little annoyed when Mike won fire.
Yes.
But like in that point, it was like, well, Mike's in the final three. I now have to account for that. But was I ever angry or mad or annoyed?
Yeah.
Um,
I just wonder if, because I think that you're just the most positive person that there is. And,
Thank
I
you.
really feed off of being around people like you, that I find your energy to be infectious. And I love it so much.
Yep.
And so I just wonder, is that a recipe for your success? Just that kind of disposition?
Like, I think it really helps,
Hmm.
especially not being able to show it. Another one too. Um, Final 7, when that when Dre was voted out and all these things were happening and I knew jack diddly squat about what was going on. Like, I was blindsided. Like, luckily I was still in my seat, but I was still blindsided about what was going on. I remember like Omar coming back being like, so sorry, I couldn't tell you the plan. And I'm like, it's all good. But I was pissed. I was
Yeah.
so angry that
The
night.
knowledge is power vote.
Yes, the knowledge is
Yeah.
power vote. I remember being so angry because I'm like, I'm supposed to be your number one. You did not tell me this. Like, how dare you? But you don't go say that to a player. You're like, oh, that's fine. It's a part of the game. I totally understand why you wouldn't have time to talk to me. Things happen. I can't wait to move forward, right? So being able to show that positivity really gives you a foot in. Because if I went to Omer be like, why the hell didn't you tell me? That's so mean. I thought we were number one. So like, how dare you backstab me like this? Most likely at the final 6, there's going to be a little flag with Omer being like, maybe I should get Lindsay to play her amulet on me because Maryanne's not happy. Like, might as well just do it for safety rather than me being
Right.
like, yep, that's okay. And then Omer being like, I won't push it hard.
Yeah, and the only other time that I've seen you like angry, mad, was when you confronted Shannon Gus about how she kept saying that all of her deep dives are longer than your deep dive.
You hear the Shannon? These are me cracking my knuckles, getting ready to go to Australia to clock. No, I'm playing. Yeah, so dumb. Like, and because there's this whole thing where a lot of you might know that I have the longest deep dive in Rob Has a Podcast history. No, in a Rob interview now. Thank you,
Yeah,
Shannon.
I
Thank you,
don't think Gabler is
Taryn.
going to touch it, Maryanne.
Thank you. But what happened was then Shannon immediately did a deep dive with the winner of Survivor South Africa Second Chances. Won't say the name unless people want to catch up. But they basically spent so much time talking about my record that it padded the time of their podcast. So they beat me. Plus, it was 3 people, not just 2 people. And so it was the dirtiest
And
win
they
ever.
had more days also.
And they had
Yeah.
more days to talk about as well, too. So if we do the math on average, I think I talked the most per day, like on average. But like I said, a win is a win. So I guess, Shannon, congratulations on beating my record. I hope you're happy, and I hope you can sleep at night with PETA.
Maryanne, I would love to get your thoughts on. We had the 3rd iteration of the Survivor after show last night, and I would love to get your sense. I actually felt like that it's getting better. I thought it's been improved. I have been one of the biggest opponents of the Survivor after show. I did think that this one was actually much more memorable than present company excluded. But I didn't think that there was any things that were like huge revelations that came up in 41 or in the Survivor 42 after show. What are your feelings on where we are with the Survivor after show?
Yes. With peace and love, because I love production. I
Peace and
know
love.
Jeff loves the
Peace and love.
show. I know everyone, the show, they care about the show. But I think that if you take a pile of poop and you put sprinkles on a pile of poop, yes, it's going to be better, but it's still ass. Like, I strongly disagree with the after show. I strongly think that the after show, there should at least be one day or one night where the players can go and discuss. I think, yes, I agree with you. The content of the after show was much better than the past 2 seasons because it wasn't just rehashing what happened that we already watched. It was showing new scenes, secret scenes, which kind of goes back to the old reunion narrative where we get to go talk about, oh, this is something that happened. Here's a whole narrative that happened. We got more information and more footage, which made it more satisfying than the previous 2 seasons after shows. Fun fact, I've yet to watch my after show back because I personally think it's very dumb. I think that all of the final three are all traumatized for different reasons,
Right.
especially like the winner just won sitting there. It's like I dissociated my whole time. Then you have the people who just lost, especially when you have Cassidy who thought she had a chance of winning, then that win slipped out of her hands. That's something that I know I discussed with Mike, and Mike told me he was just eating pizza because like to kind of just like deal with, okay, my dream just slipped behind my hands. That is, I think, is something that is so hard to put on the players. Yes, the emotions are raw, but that is such a hard thing to do. And if you give them one night, it's like the feelings of rawness of the game, yes, they'll decrease, but you're still going to have that genuine feeling because they still haven't watched the show. But I think that emotional like positivity, especially after talking with the jury, like being able to have a night's sleep, being able to like shower for at least like 40 minutes, get that dirt off of you and like feel like you're out of the game, the benefits I feel would be much more increased than the negatives of that after show. So I'm
Yeah.
like I understand why they're not going to do a reunion again. It's like you save so much money, but like one day is not going to make a massive difference in the grand scheme of things. So if we're doing the after show, like continue with like showing the new secret scenes because that's super cool, but please give the player one day. Like everyone who's watched my season has only seen me ugly. I will forever be ugly. I won't get like a cute outfit.
Okay,
Like
so everybody can wear it. They could put their makeup, so they could like the final three. You could see them like if they were on the jury. Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So Maryanne, what
Mhm.
if I gave you this question of, okay, you can have a Survivor after show
Yep.
one day after the season ends, after a 25-day season, at the cost of one more day off
Mhm.
of the season. Would you still do it?
I don't think one day makes a massive difference.
Hmm.
I still would do it. I think that yes, it cuts down the voting cycles. Like one voting cycle will have to be again another one
Yeah.
day. But in the grand, like I think that, for example, if we cut from 39 days to 38 days, we're not seeing a massive difference, right? If we're cutting for 26 days to 25 days, you're not going to see a massive difference between the 26. Yes, it's significantly shorter. And
Sure.
like maybe some other past players will think there should be two asterisks on the 25 days rather than the 26.
Mhm.
But I think that the psychological well-being of the players should be taken into account when it comes to that. But this is also not saying that the Survivor does not care about the psychological well-being of the players. Like I came back broken from Survivor and I was built back up because of the care that the
Yeah.
psychological team did give me. But like I think that even being able to have one night would immensely help the players who just got out of the
Yeah.
game.
No, I agree with everything you're saying, and I really feel like that this the some of the accounts of the 43 players, Owen specifically, who told Dalton Ross F the Survivor after show, Cassidy, that she talked about how that she ended up drinking a lot of champagne to deal with all this,
Mhm.
and then also ultimately having like a panic attack
Mhm.
following the like events of trying to process all of this, that they really both of
Mhm.
them came out very strongly against this idea of
Yeah.
doing the Survivor after show. And it's not like that what we're getting is like, oh my god, but it's so good.
Mhm.
Like there's like a real, we're gaining so much by doing it
Mhm.
immediately after the final tribal
Exactly.
council.
And, like, the most interesting conversations from the after show typically are coming from the jury members who do have that time to process. Like, off the top of my head, the coolest thing was, like, the after scene when Cody literally lost, like, the note to the Beware advantage. That Cody had that time to sleep and that time to rest. So even if you're not getting that rawness from the players, like that would have lost like what 13 14 hours ago, that's still, or 13 14 hours ago, you're still going to be able to have that genuine feeling and rawness like just by pushing it one more day. So like yeah, I really
Hmm.
do agree, like after show like that one day, it's like, and then you won't have people like maybe like it would be better for the players as well too who just lost.
Yeah, I think everybody's on the same page, with the exception of the powers that be at production. So, I mean, I think we will never. Maybe if it's like Survivor 50 or something like that, like there's something like some milestone season.
Mhm.
Maybe I could see potentially some sort of a reunion. But I don't know why they don't do something that's like getting together like even like virtually after the fact
Mhm.
and putting it on Paramount Plus. Like I think that people
Mhm.
would watch that.
I think people would watch it too. And I think the players are also very interested as well as like having that reunion. It's something that we've seen in the past few seasons. A lot of the 43 players all were in LA. I think
Hmm.
16 out of the 18 players, if I remember. All the 42 members, we were disseminated between our different locations. We had a bunch of people in LA. We had a bunch of people in New York, New Jersey, and we had a bunch of people in Toronto, but we all still got together. So the players want to together after the season. The players are willing to get together after the season and have that discussion. So I really think that, especially like with Paramount Plus, even if it's like a Zoom thing where it's like kind of like, ooh, funky, and like it's like people will still be interested in watching. And Paramount Plus is such a great way. Well, Paramount Plus US, the Canadian one is not so good.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the Survivor after show?
Um, I think the Survivor after show, like I said, it's like they added some sprinkles to the pile of poop, but it's still a pile of poop. So give it
Hmm.
one night and maybe it'll be like asparagus.
Okay. Um, Josh Kettles, who I had this pleasure of speaking to the other day, that he predicted your win last season.
Mm-hmm.
I think he also may have predicted that he called this shot on Gabler also. So either he's heavily spoiled or he really knows what he's talking about. Um, Josh wants to know, was this tribal council as live as Maryanne's was? It's so rare for people not to have their minds made up already. But these back-to-back final tribal councils were seemingly two of the most wide open.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Josh. Thanks for calling in and typing in. I personally think that yes, the tribal councils were very open. I think that the tribal councils, a lot of people came with their notions of what they wanted to hear. So it's like, I want to hear about this, this is this. I don't really mind where I get that information from, but I think that they are very open. And I think that goes less to the new era and more to who's being cast. You're casting people who are super fans. You're casting people who respect the game, right? So when you're seeing them in the jury, they don't just want they don't just want to go and shut someone out. They want to see someone. They want to like give everyone an equal chance to go and win.
Hmm. Yeah, the jury, I feel like always comes into it's like, hey, we have not made up our minds tonight, though. And then the final tribal council happens, and then the jury does seem to go in one direction. Do you feel like that the jury just says they don't know necessarily who they're voting for?
Mm, I think it's a mixture of both.
Hmm.
I think that some jury members do know who they're going to be voting for when entering in, but rarely is it all of the jury members who exactly know what it's going to happen, unless it's like a very clear cut case. Like, for example, based on the story that we saw, if Jesse was in the final three, it would have been a very clear cut one based on their jury reactions when he lost fire. So that one I kind of understand, but especially like when the jury members are asking people questions equally, asking people questions equally, not based on their reactions, but based on the question, how many people are asked, like who the question is being asked to. They are usually pretty open.
Okay, Marianne, do you have other thoughts about the finale?
Um, the
Because I have a lot of
finale,
questions
yes,
for you as well.
yes, the finale I think was it was a very interesting finale for me because of course this is when I was giving my crown away, and I remember feeling like a little bit of nerves and trepidation because Survivor puts you through the psychological rigor, but it was still very enjoying to watch. It was still very enjoying to like follow what was going on, to see what the story was, to see the players in their end. Like, I did enjoy the finale. I think it was wild, bonkers, bananas, and it was wild to just see everyone just be like question mark along with me, but I
Right.
truly did enjoy it.
I really enjoyed it too. And I know that the outcome was not the desired outcome for some, and maybe it was for some others. But I just feel like that this is Survivor, baby. Like
Mhm.
this is like as unpredictable as it gets.
I think that's the beauty of it. Like, anyone can win Survivor. Like, it's like no c- there is no cookie cutter what you need to do to win Survivor. And that's the beauty. It shows that anyone can win Survivor. Like, that was something that I was talking about too, even last season in my exit interview with you, where when Survivor's playing, I want to see more diversity in the winners. And this isn't just like diversity in who we are on our
Right.
identity, but also in the way that you're playing, and also in the way that like like in the way that you play and the way that you win. There isn't one way to win Survivor. You win Survivor, that's it. So seeing that immediately after the next season is so spectacular as well too, especially because Gabler, I think he said, was second oldest person to win, second only to Bob. I think that's a great, like, I think that's an amazing thing. It's like, I spoke about how the perfect age range to win was 25 to 35, but I don't want to only see 25s to 35s playing Survivor, because that's not what Survivor is. It's like, that's basically shutting out people for the adventure of the lifetime when you hit that 36, or basically being like, you're not going to win if you're under that 25. And I don't think that's what Survivor is.
Yeah. Is there anything that you saw in Survivor 43 that you feel like might have been different had players been able to see all of season 42?
Oh my goodness. Um, like, the only thing that I think about is maybe the way that Jesse handled his second idol.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the only way, because I think I'm trying to think, and I'm trying not to be egotistical, but I'm trying to think, what are some other non outside experienced jaw droppers that have occurred in Final Tribal? Like, because
Well,
you have people like Jeremy talking about his
and
family.
and I don't want to make it only about the final tribal council. Like, I think
Yes.
that there are other things, like potentially
Mm-hmm.
like the way that knowledge is power played out in your
Mm-hmm.
season. And I wonder if like there might have been other things that had they seen the back half of your season,
Um,
if the season might have been different. Because the thing that's
yeah.
frustrating about Survivor is that it takes so long. It's like we take, like is it one step forward or two steps back, or two steps forward and one step back? Because
That
basically,
one.
like, we have a year in between the seasons. So all right, we have just, like, as viewers, we've seen Survivor 41, we've seen Survivor 42, we've seen Survivor 43. Now we're going to watch Survivor 44, where the players don't know anything that happened in season 43. So the lessons that we learned in season 43 are unknown to the survivors in season 44. They've only seen up to Survivor 42.
Yeah.
And
I think
potentially season 45 will play, and they will have seen season 43 and part of season 44, but not the end of season 44.
I think the two steps forward, one step back is very, very emphasized in the new era, because we don't have themes and we don't have locations. So
Mm-hmm.
the only thing, a lot of things that people differentiate the gameplay with, the seasons with, is the gameplay, right? So people are like, okay, what about this move? What about that move? Right? Because like a lot of times when you have back-to-back seasons, for example, season 37, season 38, right? Where it's like you have David versus Goliath, and then you have a lot of split votes, and then you have Edge of Extinction, which now has its whole completely different feel. And but you don't see anyone who's like, oh, they did this move in season 37, they did this thing in season 37, because there is a whole new theme in 38 that now goes and encompasses that season. So maybe if we go and look back at the back-to-back seasons, we might start seeing parallels in like season like 35 and season 36, because they haven't seen each other. But because we don't have that theme, or we don't have that location that's hiding the double play, it's really being exasperated more in this new
Mm-hmm.
era. And
Yeah.
especially since, too, a lot of new advantages are being introduced, it's like we're seeing the evolution of said advantages are just happening twice with the same players. For
Mm-hmm.
example, the nullification of knowledge is power occurring the exact same way in 41 and 42.
Mm-hmm.
Because we didn't have a theme to be like, oh, there's this theme or there's this area. We only focus on, this is how knowledge is power was played. This was the move that's the similar thing, or this is how people were doing the phrases. This is how they hit it. And so I really think that it's more so no theme and
Yeah.
no underlying condition to hide with the introduction. No underlying conditions. We're seeing the evolution of new things very immediately. So it really seems like that echo.
So I want to get your perspective on knowledge is power, because I think
Mm-hmm.
that one of the many reasons why it's so great to talk to you about Survivor, you don't necessarily put old school Survivor on a pedestal in the way, like, okay, well, that was the way it should be because that's the way it
Mm-hmm.
was when it was older. So knowledge is power. That we saw it come back into the game twice. Both times it was ineffective. It's making people do all sorts of like unpredictable things. Are you a proponent of knowledge is power being here to stay?
Knowledge, I think it's so interesting because knowledge is power. The point is in the pudding where knowledge is power. But the criticism that I had about knowledge is power is because knowledge is power, but with the way that the idols and beware advantages are, basically you're giving people the knowledge, right?
Hmm.
Where, for example, a very good example is with the beads, right? You have the knowledge is power, but you have the beads. So then, after once more a couple people know, it starts to disseminate who has the idols, right? Where a good like Jesse kind of saw, because Jesse, I think, or Cody heard a story about Carla collecting beads, so it's like, okay, then she has an idol. So then after, as we've seen, I think the textbook case in season 33, Jay does have the idol. Information spreads like wildfire, especially in the early merge days of Survivor. So knowledge is power as an advantage. I think, of course, it's wild. Of course, it's like some people would consider it game breaking, but I think the game breakingness of it doesn't come with the advantage itself. It comes with the multiple opportunities based on the structure that people do about where these knowledge and advantages are.
Hmm. Okay, let me give you this question from Lee, which is sort of attached to this. Since 44 hasn't seen 43, do you think the idols will be gotten the same way? Do you think that we'll have an idea of how the idols can be earned? Specifically, I would love to know, do you think that we're going to see another redux of that the idols are all hidden in similar ways where those stories can be checked in the post
Mm-hmm.
merge with also the ability to have knowledge is power present all sorts of problems?
Mm-hmm. I personally don't think so. I think when production sees two things play pretty much very similarly, especially with like the phrase idols and like the beat idols, I think that a lot of times for season 41, it was so fun to hear the phrases, but 42, it's like, we've already seen that again. So then maybe production will now be like, okay, let's try something for 43 and something for 44. We saw this as well in 41 and 42, where we had the amulet advantage, but 41 didn't, where they want to keep things fresh. They want to keep things new. So I think that maybe the idols will be the same, but maybe they'll be different because they do add different elements into
Yeah.
that game.
Well, Marianne, I thought it was so interesting at the Survivor after show last night where they were talking about like, hey, did anybody ever consider not taking the beware advantage? And they all got to start talking. And I was talking with Jamal about this last week. Like, are the idols cursed? And the Survivor players from season 43 kind of said, yeah, ideally, you don't really want to be the person with the idol, with the beware advantage idol. You kind of want to be the right hand person of the person who is finding the beware advantage. Now, that's so interesting. I would love if we could watch season 44 and players have that takeaway going into season 44. But I'm wondering if we're just going to see it similar, and I wonder if these new players are sort of doomed to sort of learn that lesson on their own before season 45 players ultimately are able to come into that
Mm-hmm.
game potentially not wanting the beware advantage.
That is so true. And I think it's for any sort of public anything. You do not want to be the one who has it, but you want to have control and sway over it.
Hmm.
I think this is something as well where it was verbalized in 43, but it was even with Omar had the prototype in 42 with me and the idol, where it's like Omar literally told me, I will let you know when to play the idol. It's like, don't worry. It's like, I'll tell you when to play it. So even though it was like, I did ultimately play it for my own reasons, but it's like originally speaking, Omar was the one who was actually controlling the idol. In that tribal, when I wasn't sure if the vote was on Lydia, it was up to Omar to tell me, okay, Maryanne, you're gonna play your idol. So like even though it was mine, it's like the decisions were not being made only by me, and he got none of the heat because of it
Hmm.
as well, too.
Okay. Marianne, I want to start to bring in some questions from the
Mm-hmm.
listeners of the podcast as we're bouncing all over. Um, Mikey Powell wants to know, would you, Marianne, align with the Ali Gabler in a possible Winners at War Part 2 season?
Oh my goodness. Would I align with Ali Gabler? I don't think I should say this because then, it's going to be the Poker Alliance 2.0.
Oh,
I
okay.
think that, honestly, I think that aligning with the you I have a great story for this little answer because my answer is I cannot truly say. And this is why. When it was early in the game, I wanted my number one to be Mariah. I wanted Mariah to be my number one. I wanted us to work together. I wanted us to get to the end together. My first target on Taku was Omer. I wanted Omer out. I didn't like Omer. I wanted him to be out first. Clearly, Mariah and I then turned and started to target each other. And then Omer turned out to be my closest ally. But this happened because I was open to whatever I was receiving, right? So you can't just jump in and be like, this is the thing that I'm going to do. Because if you have those lenses, you need to be able to be flexible and adapt in this game. So yes, I am willing to go in line with Gabler, but if it's not in my best interests, then I can't then still stick to that sinking ship. It's like the Gabler galleon can only float so far.
You're into that?
Like, I think it's the coolest thing ever.
Yes. Good. Well, I'm happy. Look, I'm happy that they're happy.
Yeah. No,
can you
it's
explain
so cool.
what it is for people?
Yes. For those who are not as chronically online as me, there is one Reddit user whose name I forget. I am so sorry because I want to give you your flowers.
But I believe it's Hyena 142.
Hyena 142. Perfect. Hyena 142 in season 42 did this thing called the Strunk Train. And every single episode, they just add someone else to the person who's voted out. And it just becomes this chaotic photo. So they did this with Gabler, and it's called the Gabler Galleon. And so like we're all like Gabler, shooting, like rooting for this like boat, and more people are added onto the boat as people are getting voted out. And now the Gabler Galleon, because Gabler won, it's now this beautiful, beautiful picture of Gabler, and it's spectacular and amazing. And I think Hyena, it's one of the things that I always look forward to each week to see what type of cracked thing is going to be on it. And it's just really fun. So yes, I am a Gabler Galleon, and I'm very excited to see what 44 brings for transportation and a player.
What is it, galleon? Is it a pirate ship?
I think it's a pirate ship, yes.
Boy, I learn new stuff every day.
Which makes sense because Gabler did say he was going to play as Rupert and pirate steal.
Pirates pillage.
Oh, that's much better. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So, all right. Interesting. So we'll be on the lookout. But we could work with anybody, right?
Yeah. I'm very excited to work with anybody, everybody, anyone. Yeah.
Okay. There have been some of the Survivor fans that think that your game is similar to a Cassidy game. Bryce 3R2 said, I feel like that Maryanne and Cassidy had similar games. Maryanne did slay a lot more than Cassidy, though. What do you think that Cassidy could have done at the final tribal council to get that Maryanne win? Do you look at Cassidy as a similar type of player to yourself?
I would say no. And the reason why is because, like Cassidy said at Final Tribal, she always had the finger of the pulse, and she always was at least some part of the conversation when it came to the votes. Like, she was never clearly on the bottom, clearly an outcast. Like, she was always in that kind of like middling area. For me, yes, I did vote correctly almost every tribal, and people were telling me things, but starting from the merge, I really had to work for people to tell me things. I really had to trust and be reintegrated back into the tribe. And I feel as if with that outcome, it's like Cassidy could say, I was always had my finger on the pulse. I was always a part of this, but I couldn't say that because that was untrue. I could say I reintegrated myself and I got more information. So, and I think that even though we might have been similar in our voting positions for a lot of the game, that really makes a difference because I have my story is completely different. And it's much easier to go and prove because I'm like, look, I was literally on the outs. And look, I voted all these people right as well, too. And another thing as well, too, is that I did have a move that was very clearly, okay, this is Maryanne. She strategized that. And even that came with a little bit of contention with the jury as well. But I did stand my ground on it. So I think that the biggest thing, especially for Cassidy, would to be to discuss about, okay, maybe I wasn't always driving the car, but I was always in the car, and having that narrative and really seeing and really upplaying that narrative to see if the jury would respect that story.
My question for you, Maryanne, is how does it feel to be the best Survivor season of 2022 in the US? I did not see Dalton Ross's new rankings. I got to think that that 42 is higher than 43, right?
I think, as you'd say, rankings are arbitrary and
Yes,
reductive,
as somebody would say. Yeah.
as someone would say, but I think, not even speaking on ranking, but I think I'm very proud to be on 42. And I
Hmm.
think that even as a fan, being on a season that is, even though it's not even though it's not supposed to be about the reception that the fan has, because it's your experience and it's your story, it's very exciting to know that like people enjoyed my season as much as I enjoyed my season.
Hmm. Yeah. Um. Yeah, Sam. Let me know where did Dalton Ross ultimately rank Survivor 43? I'm curious to know. If I had to guess, I'm gonna guess it's probably around like I'm gonna guess around like 30. If I had to guess off the top of my head, what number were you? Do you remember?
Um, I think we were 20 because of
20.
all the advantages that brought us down. And I
Mm-hmm.
think 41 is at 22 and
Mm-hmm.
43 is at 24 for Dalton
Yes, yes.
Ross.
Okay. That boy, Dalton Rose, we're really hedging here. 42 is number 20, 41 is 22, 43 is 24.
Yeah.
So he's basically saying they're all the same.
Yeah. But like I think as well too, where it's like what we were talking about rankings being reductive and arbitrary, I think that really makes a difference. And I was talking to Zach about this because Zach and I are both really big fans. But one thing
Big,
about me,
two of the biggest. Yeah.
yes. One thing about me though is that I started watching at season 37 of David versus Goliath, and the show that previously got me into it was Big Brother. Big Brother's known for a lot of massive twists. It's known for a lot of people entering the game, big powers, weeks are canceled. That's the understanding that I had of game show games. Then you come to David versus Goliath, you come with the idol nullifier, all these idols. That was my baseline for Survivor. So
Hmm.
when I'm coming and seeing all these advantages, I'm like, this is the norm. This is Survivor. This is okay. But you have people who have seen the evolution of Survivor. And so a lot of people are like, oh, this is how it was in the past. This is how it should be in the present. But because I come a little bit earlier, I have the fluidity in the way that I go and perceive the game of Survivor. I have the fluidity of being like, this is what's supposed to happen. This is what also happens. In addition, when playing the games, I can also tell you that when all these twists happen, because we have the full like we're there the whole time, it's not cut down for an episode, it doesn't feel as frantic and as hectic in person as it is shown on TV because there's just more time.
Hmm.
So for me, I'm like, okay, you have all these twists, you have all these things that are happening. And for me, I'm like, okay, like this is just the mechanic of the game. And I'm more go with the flow about it when other people might be more resistant to said twists.
Okay. My rankings of the new era. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
42,
Okay.
43, 41.
Okay. Okay. Oh, thank you. I was thinking about dinging. Thank you.
Yes. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. It's a
I,
top 3 list.
thank you. I'd like to thank my whole cast.
Hmm.
Um, I'd like to thank Jeff for seeing a chance with me, Jesse for casting me. I'd love to no, I'm not gonna do all of this. You're gonna have to
Okay.
start playing the music.
Okay, that's fine. Here's a question from Sarah West. Was Gabler's decision to donate the money to charity, will that make people more or less likely to consider him a good winner? Do you think that will have any bearing on how people look at Gabler, the winner, in his game?
Hmm. I think that of course it goes and really shows his character of a kind person. Like
Yes.
maybe like he's off track, like in like with thinking of the palm fronds. But then after, with him showing that he's going to be donating all the money, you can now be like, well, it's happening in kindness. Like, putting palm fronds down on someone, maybe they don't want it, but like it's out of kindness. You can see his intentions and his heart,
Hmm.
right? But I think as well, too, where a lot of viewers of the show are able to go and separate the person with the game that they've played. So like maybe like so you know, maybe it can go and affect the winner rankings, but not for everyone. Because, of course, people rank winners based on different things: their perceived strategic game, their character, their perceived physicality game. Everyone has different rankings. So it'll shift on some lists, it won't on others.
I think he will be more memorable for
Yes.
what he's doing, and I think it is
Yes.
making will make him even like larger than life in terms of like the type of person that he is to come in and ultimately. I don't think there's ever been a person in the history of any of these shows that we follow that like I say like okay, yes, I won the prize and I'm giving it the entire prize away.
Yeah. I don't think so either. And I do think he will be memorable for that as well, too. And like
Hmm.
everything you said.
Yeah. Okay. Um, how about let's take a question from T-Bird had asked us a question.
Hi, T-Bird.
T-Bird wanted to know, do you think a sequestered jury would change the outcome of the winner? I suppose that T-Bird is saying that would Cassidy have won had the jury had been sequestered?
I cannot say, because the thing about that is we don't know
We don't know.
who the checklist came from. We don't know how much modification of the checklist happened at Ponderosa. So
Yeah.
there's so many different factors, where it's like maybe everyone all immediately agreed on the checklist. Maybe there were two factions and one faction lost, one faction won. We don't know that. So maybe is there a chance that would change the votes? Most likely, most possibly. But everyone is listening to the same answers at Final Tribal, so maybe it'd still be the same. So I genuinely don't have a good answer for that. I do know that, like, of course, the jury speaking with each other gives more information about why people would want to vote for people. But I also know that players are individual and they make the decision based on themselves.
Yeah.
No player has any power to like change a mass of people.
I want to ask you about something that is a little bit of maybe a hot button topic. Okay.
Mhm.
I want to talk about Carla and Cassidy. We had
Mhm.
a scene in the episode where Carla basically comes to Cassidy and is talking about how, like, wait, you're trying to get rid of me? And Cassidy, or and then Carla says something along the lines of that she's going to go to the jury and talk about how she's not going to vote for Cassidy.
Mhm.
And I know that, when this kind of thing comes up, a lot of times people don't like it. Do you feel like, is this inbounds or not inbounds as far as you're concerned?
Mm, like, I think very few things are out of bounds when it comes to the game.
Yeah.
I think that I think it's a very ineffective way to argue there. I think that I think that because if you say, if you take me into the jury, I won't vote for you. But then after, if you keep me in the jury, like if you keep me in the game, like this person will win. It's a
Hmm.
catch 22 when it comes to it,
Yeah.
right? So I think that the best way, and even Carla in her exit interview said this was me trying to like make a shot. I came into the
Yeah.
game and then I was still very open in who I was going to vote for. So I think it's just one of the things that you go and you try to stick, you try to throw, and see if it works. And then, but I think it's something that very rarely works. And I think it's
y-
something, and I think it's an argument that we've seen outside of Survivor many times. If you don't do this, I won't do this.
Yeah. It's so interesting to me. And I don't think that this is something that's out of bounds. But I think it's
Hmm.
something that's really interesting to talk about where that, you have sort of like this, and, maybe, in the game, Cassidy felt like, oh no, we're equals. But from Carla's perspective, it definitely seemed like, okay, this is like a, mentor mentee
Hmm.
type
Hmm.
relationship. Even
Hmm.
if Cassidy said, "Hey, Carla and I, we're 50-50." That, in Carla's mind, I think that she thought, "Hey, this is like, I'm leading this thing, and this is like my protege," and
Hmm.
that is a difficult pill to swallow. And I've had like both types of those relationships in my life. And like I think that there is like there can be some like animosity that
Yep.
happens where the student becomes the teacher or the master.
Yep. Hmm.
I mean, look to Star Wars, okay? And it's the kind of thing where there can be some animosity there. And I think that if you're Cassidy, maybe in a perfect scenario, that maybe you can be responsible for getting Carla out of the game, and it's a respect move. But I kind of feel like that it's the best case scenario is where Carla gets taken out of the game, and this is
Hmm.
like what happened with James, and maybe with James and Cassidy, this was a similar relationship. James got taken out of the game through nothing having to do with
Hmm.
Cassidy, and he ends up being the only person to vote for
Hmm.
her. It's kind of a blessing sometimes
Yep.
where your ally gets taken out, and it has nothing to do with you. I think back to in talking this through with Steven, like Andrew Savage and Jeremy Collins, where
Hmm.
Savage gets taken out of the game having nothing to do with Jeremy. And not to say that wasn't a 50-50 relationship, but it was something that Jeremy would have had to untangle to get to the end of the game.
Yep.
He was working with a lot of different people. And so then and Andrew goes to the jury and stumps so hard for Jeremy. Like,
Yep.
Jeremy's a great guy. He should win the game. If it can't be me, it should be Jeremy. And so that I think that is a thing in these relationships where it's sort of like this mentor mentee type of relationships that you have to be very particular how you untangle them.
Yep. Yep. I feel as if I was partially in a mentor-mentee relationship in my season, where the person, it was Drea, where a lot of times where Drea felt as if she was going and helping me with her game. But when Drea was out, it's like there was a main person who got Drea out and it was not me. And so that did benefit me in the end, where Drea did vote for me in the end. But I think that if you are in a mentor-mentee relationship, regardless of whether you think that you're in, but if the other person thinks that you're the mentee and they point blank talk about that relationship, it just, like I said, it puts you in such a hard position. Because what's Cassidy's, like, what are you, like, if someone is saying, I did all of this, I'm going to tell everybody you did all of this, if you don't vote me out, like, what do you do in that situation where it's like, do you vote with that person? And then are they still going to go and say things because they're out? Do you still vote against that person and now you really feel as if that's going to happen? Do you keep that person in even though you don't know that you're going to beat them? It is a very, very hard thing.
So I have not rewatched the final tribal council again. I wonder, is the move then, if you're Cassidy and it's at that late stage in the game, there's nothing you can do. You have to get Carla out. You probably won't beat her in the end. That can you call that out at the final tribal council? Do you and do you remember if she did, or maybe it didn't? It happened and it didn't make the episode. But to say, hey, I just want to let everybody on the jury know that Carla seemed to think that you sheeple were so weak-minded that she was going to be able to come in and poison the jury against me. She told me she was going to do that. So I have more respect for you, independent thinkers. But that was a threat. She thought she would be able to come in and manipulate all of you and think that I was like, could you do that?
If you're willing to burn Carla's vote, yes. But it's so hard though, because let's say Carla did go talk about, like, oh, let's vote this person out, and it did work and it was influencing. It's like, how much would the jury, that, not saying this is what happened, this is hypothetical. So let's say that Carla did go and poison the jury, and then Cassie's like, you might be poisoned, and then people are like, am I poisoned? Like, it's just when it's been like 2 or 3 days, it's like, what do you do in that situation? But then also, let's see that they were open and they were open and nothing happened. Then Cassidy's like, Carla said this, but then Carla didn't say anything. It's it's just a horrible, horrible situation to be put in. It's like, there really isn't any way I think Cassidy could have won in that situation. Like, it just, like, I think that she did her best, especially as in, like, apologizing for that argument, or bringing it up and acknowledging that argument about the final, like, about it. I think that it was hard because a lot of the jury perceived her as apologizing as trying to get a vote, which was hard. But, like, I think that it's just a very, very hard situation to be put in.
Yeah. And she doesn't have a lot of options at that point either, that they could go for Jesse, and they don't know that Jesse has an idol, but he does. And they're trying to get to the end with Gabler. So yeah, the Cassidy Carla thing, it just turned into like a very ugly divorce in the game where, it was like that Carla wanted to take Cassidy out, but then it was just like one of these things where, like, it was kind of like botched. It didn't go through. Cassidy found out about it, and it was just kind of like a hanging thing that was just like ultimately festered.
Yep. And I see it especially too, where it's like, in Carla's perspective, you're trying to do whatever you have to do to stay in the game. You're not thinking, what's Cassidy thinking? What's Cassidy really doing? What do I have to do to stay in the game? So I understand where it's coming from as well too. But it's just also a very hard position for Cassidy, where it's like, wow, like, Carla, you were targeting me. Like, am I just supposed to, like, lay down, roll, and die? But, like, also, it's like, what's Carla gonna do? Oh yeah, you were targeting me. Good on you. Good job. Like, it's a very emotions are heated, and it's just very hard to react like both in a strategical sense and in an emotional sense in the same way.
And with hindsight, I think it's interesting to go back and look at that final 7 vote, where ultimately Sammy got voted out of the game. Carla, if you, for everybody who's can remember back to the final 7, Carla wanted to vote out Cassidy, and that's the move. She goes to Jesse and Cody. I want to vote out Cassidy. Jesse says, "Well, if Carla wants Cassidy out, let's keep." Let's keep Cassidy. Let's vote for
Mhm.
Sammy, and then we'll
Mhm.
also try to make Carla vote for Cassidy, and then that will be like a bad relationship.
Mhm.
Ultimately, Sammy says he's going to play his shot in the dark, and Carla doesn't end up doing that. But I do think that in hindsight, getting rid of Cassidy in that spot does really change the complexion of the game, especially
Mhm.
if Sammy had written Carla's name down at that point, but if Carla could get Sammy back in her good graces, then potentially that's like a little bit more of a viable faction moving forward of if Carla has Sammy, Gabler, he's with Jesse and Cody, but maybe that there's a path to Owen potentially more.
Mhm.
So I think Carla does I think her instincts were right that the
Mhm.
things were going to be better for her with Cassidy out of the game as opposed and keeping Sammy.
Mhm. It's just it's it's hard to know who to trust though.
Yeah.
Especially if someone's crossed you that way, then it's like, am I willing to then pull them into the plan? And then what if I pull them in, but then they flip it around again? Right?
Hmm.
So I understand why Carla was working with the people who she thought she could work with. She thought she could work with Jesse because of the past experience. She thought she could work with Cody because of the past experience to get Cassidy out. So I understand why like she didn't then try to like do a double like I understand also why she tried to like let Sammy vote whatever because it's like a part of it was trying to split the votes enough to get Cassidy out. But you want to work with the people who you trust. You typically don't. It's very hard to go, especially when you don't have a good rapport with someone, to be like, okay, I have a bad rapport with you. I've trusted you, but like let me maybe get burnt again. You know?
Okay. The great Hudson Kurkowski wants to know who was your initial winner pick as well as your winner pick throughout the season?
Oh my
Do you have one
goodness.
winner pick and you stick with it?
I have one winner pick and I stick with it typically. And so that's what happened this season. I was like I was rooting for Owen. I was a Knight Rider since day 1. Like I loved Owen. I thought that he had like a very good chance of winning. I felt really good. And then it's been an emotional journey for me, like an emotional roller coaster cuz like, you know, I win and I'm like, I think Owen's gonna win. I think Owen's gonna win. Owen gets kicked down. I'm like, okay, that's fine. It's like he's gonna get back up. He's gonna get back up. He gets back up. Oh, and he's kicked again. Okay, no, don't worry. But he's gonna get back up. He's gonna get back, and he's kicked again, and he's gonna get back. And that's been like my emotional roller coaster. So even when I saw Owen in the final 5, I was like, there's still a chance. He's in the final 5. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. Even though like that win equity, especially like in the week, it's just like I think he might be like 3rd place. But I'm like, no. I'm like, if he somehow manages to get out first, like Carla, then and then get out Jesse, and then have like a big story. So watching it in the finale, I was waiting for that big story. I was waiting for that big move. But then, and even like the storytelling was like Owen being like, I need that one move. I need that one move. But he just kept on not getting that one move. And as soon as Cassidy picked him to go to the end, I'm like, his story was about getting that one final shot and he didn't get it. So that was when I just put the Owen flag down and I'm like, rest in peace, Owen. It was great. It was great, but it was a roller coaster. It was a very big roller coaster.
Mhm. And you love the roller coaster. You have your arms up the
Yeah,
whole time.
I
You love it.
know, I know, and
Hmm.
I'm usually good at picking people who have like far equity. I think season 40, I picked Tony.
Hmm.
Um, season 39, I picked Lauren. So that was very stressful.
Yes.
38, did I pick anyone?
Did you have a winner pick in season 42 when you were out there? You're like, okay, this is the winner, and it's me.
Um, kind of. It was me or
Hmm.
Omar. I wanted me or Omar to win.
But from like looking at the cast, like, did you feel
Oh,
like,
from the cast? Chanel. Chanel's my winner pick. And then
mhm,
High's second. Like Kai's a close second, but Chanel, like, mwah, like Chanel would have been my winner pick, I think, if I wasn't on the season.
okay. All right. This is a question from Ryan M, who wants to know,
Mm-hmm.
whose game on season 43 would you say was most similar to your own and why?
Mm, that's a very good question. No one that won immunity, I think.
Hmm.
Um,
Maybe
no,
Jesse.
that was just a joke because
Yeah.
I won no immunities. I think Jesse, I think, had more agency than me. but I feel as if I
Mhm.
very related to the strategicness, especially with his duo with Cody, and especially like the brutal blind side with Cody. I relate to as well too. That's something that I really relate to with Jesse's game is like having like that final barrier to then have to go and try to win. Um, oh my goodness. I relate to Janine as well too. Like this girl just had like the roughest rough like
Yeah, she had a
oh my
very
gosh, a very rough 3 cycles. Like a very
mhm.
very rough 3 cycles, but
I think
like
it's a season.
yes. Oh, true cuz her oh my goodness, poor Janine. I love her.
Mhm. And then
Um
culminating in then like, "Oh, by the way, I had your idol the whole time."
her face, that zoom in, that satisfaction was like but, like, the thing about which I also relate with Janine is, like, she literally got beaten down, but this girl did not ever give up. She was always fighting,
No.
always strategizing, always trying to find her way in. It just didn't work out for her. So I really do relate to the tenacity, of that as well too. But then, of course, we do have the Ala Gabler as well too, who kind of had like the oh, like let's use Gabler for a vote. Where I think a lot of times for the especially for the early merge, mid merge, a lot of people were just viewing me as like someone who was reliable for a vote to, but not someone who would be reliable to like not someone who people want to strategize with. The only people who really my main strategy people were like Lindsay and Omer, but then the other core of the alliance, like the other side, like Hi, Mike, they wouldn't really be going and like strategizing with me. So I do relate to that as Gabler as well too. But like I think it's like we don't Survivor doesn't cast to get clones of other people. So I don't think I'll ever be able to relate to anyone's game because they're all casting very different people. Of course,
Mhm.
they'll have some different associations and you can pick and choose, but I don't think there's going to be anyone who can be like, this person played exactly like me.
Maryanne, did you catch the preview for Survivor 44?
I did. I did. It seemed
W
like they were saying, this game's still hard. Look at all the people who are
Did
dying.
anybody say it wasn't hard? I guess people said it was 26 days, but, like, do you think that they tried to ratchet it up and make it harder?
No, I think it's the same. Like,
It's just unlucky.
I think it's just unlucky. Like, I'm thinking about that fall of the cliff or like the medical being called in. Like, oh my goodness. Yeah, I
Nowhere to
saw
hide in a
that.
dangerous game, would you say?
Nowhere to hide in a dangerous game. That's true. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think I'm excited for 44. I'm excited to watch it. I'm excited to like see like
Yeah.
the players, to see like how they play, to see the journey. I'm excited to see the pregame interviews because I think this is like our season was fully watched and to see how 42 affected the
They'll
other
say, "I
seasons.
wanted to play like Maryanne."
I got one on 43, Mariah. Sorry
Yes.
about the M curse, but Mariah said Marianne for non-winner. But
Mhm.
yeah,
She didn't
yeah,
know.
she didn't know. But yeah, I'm very excited to see how 44 goes.
Mhm. Okay. Um, yeah, it's interesting. Like, it seems like that's wild that that's what they wanted to highlight, but, okay. So, we'll
Yeah.
see.
It
Yeah.
also felt like they were less that they highlight I might be wrong, but it felt as if they highlighted on people longer than in the
Mhm.
previous previews, where it's like I felt as if I got like a lot about a few people and only shots from other people. When for the past previews, it's like you get just like a little snippets of everyone, but you wouldn't get like a lot of like talking like day zero confessionals.
Okay. Kyle wants to know, we've never seen the fire winner place third or the person who gets brought place second. Do you think either of these will ever happen? Which is more likely?
We've never seen the fire winner place third
Or the person
or
who
the
gets
person who
brought
gets brought
to
place
take second?
second. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's see about that. What's the best chance?
I think that the fire
Fire
maker place
third.
third is
I
more like,
think I think
yeah.
that's more likely because a lot of times in fire, you're putting the person who you think can beat the other person, you know?
Hmm.
If not putting the person not if not putting the 2 people who are big threats, you put someone where it's like,
Yeah.
this person can take it out. I think the person who's getting brought taking second, I think that's a little harder, um, to occur because in
Hmm.
that sense where it's like being taken, if you're able to twist it into a way to show your social game, that's a way, or being
Yes.
taken can also be like being kicked in the mud and being like, you weren't good enough to like
Yeah.
have anything, and that can be a disadvantage. But I don't think there's any neutrality in being
Yeah.
taken.
I could see it in sort of like the 7-1-0 of it all, where it's like the winner gets 7 and the person who is brought is the 1.
Mm-hmm.
So it could happen, but I think that the fire maker
Yeah.
is from third place. I could see that.
Yes.
Okay. Um, Maryanne, one of the things that I want to schedule this off season is,
Mm-hmm.
so we have a big week on the podcast. So
Yep.
of course you're here with me now.
Yep.
Taryn on the stock watch is going to have your
Mm-hmm.
friend Omer, and then we're
Yes.
going to close out the Survivor Academy for. Do you know this part
Yes,
5 of
I
Survivor
do.
Academy with your former fiance?
You mean no, I'm playing. Not
Okay.
again.
Zach Wertenberger is going to join us for part 5 of Survivor Academy, the patron-only series where we talk about everything you need to learn
Mm-hmm.
from the season for future Survivor players. First time we're having a Survivor player join us. And so
Oh.
there has been like some spirited debate of who actually knows the most Survivor trivia out of you
Oh, yep.
and your Survivor castmates, Omer
Mm-hmm.
and Zach.
Yep. Yeah. Am I the one who's saying this now?
Well, did you want to talk any trash about why it's actually you?
Oh my gosh. No, I'm not gonna talk trash. I already won something. I gotta give the loser something to be happy about,
Yes.
right?
Okay. Well, we are trying to work out some dates,
Yep.
and that Jordan Kalish is standing by to reprise the Twish Ultimate Trivia
Yep.
Challenge. First time ever. We're going to see 3 survivors take each other on in the ultimate battle of Survivor Trivia.
Yes. I'm so excited. When I tell you we have been talking about this since coming back from Fiji,
Mhm.
we're like, who's gonna tell Jordan that we're doing this? It's like, who's gonna host it? People are like, I think Jordan should host it, and everyone's like, I agree. So this has been like more than a year in the making. So we
Yeah.
are very excited. I'm putting my money on Zach. So if you're gonna place bets, place him on Zach or Omer. I'm good. I need to start, but I'm just like, should I study? Should I not study? Because I'm very good at like narrative and random facts. Because I used to actually do trivia in high school, and I was just really good at the random stuff. But the specific stuff, I'm not good at.
Mhm.
That's why I never got a Jeopardy callback.
Okay. Did you go out for Jeopardy?
That was my first show I auditioned for, Jeopardy. Yeah,
Yes. Well, they're crazy.
never made it past the first round
How could any show not call you back?
because I didn't get enough of the test questions right.
Okay. Well, that is big. Have you
Yeah,
considered Wheel of Fortune?
I can't spell. Did you not see how I spelled
Oh,
immunity?
it's a good thing reason that you didn't have like a word scramble like this last night.
I would have been good at the word scramble. I practice word scrambles. I made my friend like message me because we had like 2 weeks in quarantine where we could call one person, and I made her like just give me a string of letters and
Mhm.
like spaces of the numbers, and I would like cut out. I actually have it still in my room. I'd cut out like little squares, and then I'd do word scrambles every day just to figure out like what the word scramble was.
Yeah. Sam says that I'll make sure Jordan doesn't ask anything about the last 6 episodes of Token Cheens.
Thank
Now,
you.
Marianne, are you excited to see that Survivor Token Cheens is coming to Netflix?
America. Netflix
No,
America, not in
so close.
Canada.
So
Not in
close.
Canada.
Oh man.
No,
Okay.
so we never get, like I told you, in Canada, we never get anything. So we don't even have HBO here. Did you know that? No
Oh my
HBO.
God.
We have Crave. It's a
How do
syndicated
you
thing.
watch The White Lotus?
I don't.
Oh,
I don't. I just learned through osmosis, and my boyfriend's like, "Oh my gosh, do you know what happened in the light lotus?"
don't say it. Yeah.
Yeah, no spoilers.
Yes. Okay. All right. Maybe Mike White will want to put you in a future season.
Mike White, if you are listening to this, I would be gagged,
He
but
does. He does know how to listen to
yes.
the podcast. Yeah.
But the person who would be better is Lydia Meredith from my season. She literally
Mhm.
like okay, she doesn't have a shrine to you because that's creepy. But you are her model and idol. If you can get anyone from 42 on, make it Lydia. And she's based in LA. It's going to be so easy. She also acts. Lydia Meredith, Mike White, please and thank you. That's my dream and wish.
Okay. That would be a good call. All right, Marianne. Anything else from season 43 of Survivor that you want to make sure we talk about?
I think that season 43 was a fun season. I
Yeah.
think that watching through it, it was very fun. I think that it was very interesting. I think that Jeff's interview about it was absolutely brutal and rude and
Which
funny.
one? Which one?
Basically, Jeff said it was so weird. Everyone just wanted to go with the flow, but no one knew what the flow was, and people were frustrated about the flow. But they're the ones who made the flow, so that's how they all played.
Yeah, there was a lot about this. This is interesting. That there was a lot about the social contract,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems like that in hindsight, based on reading some of these interviews, that Jeff was frustrated that like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, the social contract is, hey, you got to trust what we say, or you'll get voted out. Which I think that
Mm-hmm.
Jeff probably would like a game that is more fluid. But I
Yes.
think that perhaps that the people that were the powers in the game kind of said like, hey, you either do what we tell you to or you get voted out. That's the social
Mm-hmm.
contract.
Which is very interesting because it didn't really pan out in the end because the leaders of the contract were voted out too as well. So you did obviously see some fluidity, but it felt very rigid until that end game.
Maybe that's the fine print on the social contract. And then if you vote us out, we'll make Gabler win.
Stop.
You'll lose to Gabler. Yeah, that's the social contract.
I guess so. I'll have to
Read the
read.
fine print.
I don't know. Read any fine print. It's a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nope.
Okay. Well, Maryanne. Okay.
Yes.
So that somebody's asking me, please ask about the sequestered jury. Is it T-Bird that's asking us about that? Maryanne doesn't think the sequestered jury would. We don't know what the jury told them. And
No.
Maryanne's never been on a jury.
No.
Yeah.
No.
I think it would be interesting to see what would happen with a sequestered jury.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I don't know if that would ultimately change. Well, I mean, you have people who were only in the game a day ago that voted for like we saw where Jesse like just got to Ponderosa. Like, do you think that Jesse
Mm-hmm.
got poisoned at Ponderosa? Or was Jesse poisoning the jury in one day? Carla was only there for 2 days.
No, I think no. And I always think that too, where I'm not surprised that Jesse didn't vote for Cassidy because I don't think there's been a time in Survivor history where the person who goes out in fire votes for the person who put them in fire. So I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't even expecting like Jesse to vote for like Cassidy was kind of a write-off. So it
Mm-hmm.
was either going to be Gabler or Owen. And if you're looking at the final tribal performance, then it seems that even if he was sequestered, he would be voting for Gabler just based on the performance because Gabler had that very clear story about I was still playing when Owen sometimes was lacking in that.
Yes. Okay. And confirmed. Yes, this is T-Bird on asking us about
Mm-hmm.
this. All right. So, Maryanne, what's next for you?
What's next for me? So, a cool thing which is next for me is I've launched my website. Woo!
Yes. What are you doing on your website?
Yes, so it is maryanneoketch.com. Very easy. If you're in Canada, maryanneoketch.ca also works. So one thing which I really loved about Survivor and a cool opportunity that I did is I got to now have opportunities to speak and to share my story with other people, not just about Survivor, but also about my life. So this is something which I love doing. I love talking. I love speaking. So yeah, there it is. If you have any speaking engagements, anything that you need someone to speak for, please think about me. I have a whole speaking reel so you can see me talk. I have some cute pictures. I have some bios, and
Yeah.
it's a beautiful website which was made lovingly by Connor. So
Okay,
thank you.
very nice. Yes. Hi, I'm Maryanne. You know me as the winner of season 42 of Survivor, but there's much more to me that makes me who I am. I am a master's graduate, lifelong learner, lover of video games, high interval intensity training. I didn't know that. And
Yeah,
wings.
I love wings. And yeah, that was after Survivor. Imagine going to Survivor, getting your ass whooped, seeing Jonathan and Lindsay be like, I need to get stronger. So that's a new addition. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I understand if you do it, but you're a lover of it too?
I love it. Like I genuinely, it's just very brain numbing, and like you get to like push yourself, and like the best is like, and it just like reminds me of being beat down, and like every time I'm beat down, I'm like, Maryanne, do you remember that boat in day 3 of Survivor that you had to push? It's like, do
Mhm.
you want to feel dead like that again? Because sometimes you'll go and you're like, "Ah!" Then you have to go again. So I
Yeah,
really
oh
do
my god.
enjoy it.
Really, I think you might have scared people.
Oh, jump scare! Ah, whoop!
Mhm.
Jump
Mhm.
scare! That's a
All right.
TikTok.
Well, Maryanne, I just am so happy that you were able to come on and talk about the season, and I love getting your perspective
Mhm.
on all things Survivor and non-Survivor things.
Of course, of course. It's so nice to talk to you, even though you didn't know that I knew who you were. It's like I think that this past 205 days, you've really made up for it, and I do
Yes.
feel like we have like a bond and connection. So I'm very happy for that.
Yes. Okay. Well, I am so happy to hear you say that. Yeah, I had no idea that because a lot of people they don't even know from being like what is a Survivor podcast? They don't know.
I gave you a whole extra 5 minutes in my exits, Rob. Do you know how
Hmm.
big that is? That's
That was huge.
massive.
Yeah, not one
Yeah.
person today went off the script and said, "Hey, can we get some more time?"
Yeah. I'm a real
No.
one.
You're a real one. Okay. Maryanne, thank you again for making
Mhm.
this time. We next will have our Survivor feedback show. If you haven't checked out our exit interviews, check those out. And of course, the know it alls for even more Survivor 43 coverage and everything else we have going on in our Survivor podcast feed this
Mhm.
week. So thank you all so much for joining us. Take care, everybody. Have a good one.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.